I'm going to go ahead and call to order the City Council meeting for Tuesday, October 1st, 2019. Madam City Clerk, would you read the roll, please?
Mayor Christy Malchow.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Karen Moran.
Present.
Councilmember Tom Hornish.
Present.
Councilmember Jason Ritchie. Councilmember Chris Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Pamela Stewart.
Here.
Councilmember Ramiro Valderrama.
Present.
Okay. Madam City Clerk, we do have a quorum. Deputy Mayor Moran, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, entertain a motion for approval of the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. I do have an amendment. I'd like to add an agenda item. The city manager would like a discussion for date and times for the budget discussion. So I'd like to tuck that in as 14B. City manager asked me to amend the agenda to add it on. I need a second.
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. All those in favor of the agenda as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 6-0, the agenda as amended is approved. We have an executive session up front. This is regarding potential land acquisition pursuant to RCW 42.30.110(1)B. How long do we anticipate?
Half hour.
Ugh.
Okay.
Or
Or less.
less.
We'll try and be as quick as we can with this executive session. Okay.
I should have had this.
Okay, so next we're going to have public comment. But in light of the events involving Skyline High School, I've chosen to defer the subject of impact fees that would come later in this council meeting so that the district can spend its time and energy on more pressing issues. So with that, we will delve into public comment. This is an opportunity for the public to address the council. 3-minute limit per person or 5 minutes if representing the official position of a recognized community organization.
Mayor.
We have Councilmember Hornish is not on yet.
Yeah, we don't have.
Okay.
Counselor, you up yet? Oh, he's not there?
Let me just read through this,
Go,
and
yeah,
we
yeah,
can wait
go for
on
it.
the public comment
Yep.
until he's on. If you would like to show a video or PowerPoint, it must be submitted or emailed by 5 p.m. end of business day to the city clerk, Melanie Anderson at manderson@sammamish.us. Please be aware council meetings are videotaped and available to the public. And as soon as we have our 7th council member on, we will head into public comment.
I'm on now.
Okay. First, I have Mary Ellen Stone, followed by Harlan Gallinger. I'm not sure your mic is on. Is there a...
There should be a switch at the bottom.
It's oh, got it.
There we go.
Thank you.
Thanks. Mary Ellen Stone, King County Sexual Assault Resource Center. I'm also a resident of Sammamish. And I want to just take a couple minutes to talk about sexual assault services. Now, I know later in the program, in the meeting, you're going to be proclaiming October Domestic Violence Month. Sometimes people think that they're one and the same thing. Great respect for my colleague who's here from LifeWire to talk about domestic violence services. Sexual assault is related, but it's not the same thing. We, as an organization, respond to children, teens, and adult victims of sexual assault. While the offender is often known to the victim, in sexual assault cases, that's not always the case. Like, for example, last year, 12% of all the victims who reached out to us for help had been sexually assaulted by a stranger. Which is a considerable number, actually. We're seeing that starting to increase a little bit. We also know that for teens and for many adults, the offender is somebody who's known to them, maybe an acquaintance, a neighbor, a coworker, but typically not always a family member. We see family members assaulting children heavily when they're younger children. So a bit of context there. You have a document which shows the number of victims that we've responded to from who are residents of the city over the last couple years. The good news is that the numbers are increasing. And this is good because sexual assault is one of the most underreported crimes in the country. And we know that the more we can elevate awareness, the more we can encourage people to come out, the more speak out, the more we have an ability to change attitudes and change behavior and eventually eliminate sexual assault. So as council members, that you're seeing more victims of sexual assault coming forward, I would urge you to see that as a good sign. And I would urge you to actually think, how can we have more people coming forward? Because the 34 victims that we've seen year to date, which is a 30% increase over last year, is really just a drop in the bucket to the number of victims we suspect are living here. So I've given you that document so that you have a sense of what we're doing with for Sammamish residents. I've also given you one of these Be Loud buttons. And I would urge you as council members, and especially coming up for Sexual Assault Awareness Month in April, to say, how can we encourage and elevate the issue in all the platforms that the city has? Because it's that sort of broader awareness that lets people know they're not alone, that there are services available. It also lets people know that this is not acceptable behavior. Thank you for what you're doing as a city. Thank you. You funded us in the past. Hopefully, again, we'll be doing that in the future. And if you have any questions for the services we're providing to victims who are residents of the city, I'm happy to answer them at any time. I know you have a full agenda, so I'll let you go. Thank you again.
Thank you. After Harlan Gallinger, I have Mary Wichter.
Harlan Gallinger, president of the Issaquah School Board, here to speak to you tonight about this developing opiate crisis that's happened and that Mayor Malchow mentioned earlier. So our board released a statement that you have in front of you today. Did you have a paper copy? It was released electronically earlier. I wanted just to read one section of it. And it says, we know that the opiate crisis will not be fixed overnight, but within days to weeks, we commit to, number one, deeper and broader partnerships with our mayors and city councils, as well as with local law enforcement agencies to address the easy access to opiates. Number two, community-wide discussion that is inclusive to students, parents, teachers, and community members from across our district. And number three, to focus parent community meetings in our most impacted school communities to discuss prevention, early intervention, and accountability strategies. And I wanted to talk to you about those three things tonight and really talk about, like, what does that really mean and what will that look like and how will it look if we're being successful in this? So I think what it looks like to me, as we have deeper and broader partnerships, we're going to break down the silos that exist currently between the city of Sammamish and the Issaquah School District so we can better serve all of our kids and families. You have 65,000 residents, we have 21,000 students, and I think we can do better to maximize the tax dollar that we share. So what I ask is for better collaboration. So between the city council and the school board in particular, we set the tone for our district, you set the tone for the city of Sammamish. And what I would like to see is for us to set a linkage meeting together and really just talk about this one topic together that's impacting our shared constituents. Two, I'd like to invite you all to a community meeting that is hosted at Skyline on Wednesday, October 16th at 7 p.m. And three, I would be grateful if you, as a council, would direct city staff to work with the board and the district, specifically the police chief. I reached out to the city a couple weeks ago and have been wanting to have a meeting. I think you guys can help facilitate that for me, and I would be grateful for that, so we can really start these discussions. Clearly they're needed, and we would value your input in that. Two, communication. I think we all can collectively do better at communicating, one, with each other between city and district, and more importantly, two, between communicating what our shared vision is with the city of Sammamish and the Issaquah School District with our community. And I think that will help us, again, get that messaging out that will be more protective for all of our kids. And lastly, I wanted to speak about partnership. The SRO, the School Resource Officer, is a shared resource. I am grateful for your guys' contributions to that. But when we think about what it is in our focus on prevention and enforcement, what are our policies, both as a city council and a school board, that really allow them to do their best work? And are we really at that level? I don't know the answer to that, and I would rely on experts for that. But I think we need to talk about that. And then if you look on the back side, if you flip it over, you'll see I've posted the most recent Healthy Youth Survey data for alcohol use. I think this is a good proxy for what the access is in our community, and it speaks to Sammamish. And the blue bar is Sammamish, or is the Issaquah School District, and the green bar is the state. And you see we do a great job leading up to late high school, and then you see the prevalence and use of alcohol in Issaquah high schools is much higher than the state. And I think that speaks to a lot of things, but one thing that the research shows is that when the community speaks out strongly against, a value of prevention, that really has an impact on our youth. And I think that that's something that we could leverage together. So I wanted you to have that piece of data. And then I think that during this time that we have linkage, we could have a frank conversation on what it is we're doing to spend and maximize our tax dollars for prevention and enforcement. Because we know you have limited budgets, so do we, but our budgets are our value statements. And I know you share our vision and goal to make sure that every student and every child and every family in the city of Sammamish and Issaquah School District has the best opportunity for success. So I look forward to our continuing partnership and anything that we can do as a district and board to support your work in the city of Sammamish to keep our kids safe and healthy. We're all in. So thank you.
Harlan, thank you for elevating this conversation here this evening. And as the council is probably aware, but so the public is aware, there are conversations going on, and they were feverish today between both the school district as well as the city and police. So we are working in concert right now to try and do something for this community, and not just as a one-off, but as an honest effort to try and help provide for our children in our community and our community as a whole. So, Mary Wichter.
Hello, my name's Mary Wichter, and I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish. I wanted to talk about two things here in my 3 minutes. The first is you're going to see for the third public hearing come through that this map and the comp plan, which wasn't labeled, has steep slopes in gray. And I wanted you to know that the steep slopes layer has actually been available for a long time from King County. Somebody who's a concerned citizen had actually just plotted it. So the steep slopes in the city are pretty much here and here. And this is something that could be put online to the existing current online Sammamish property tool, and I would like to see that done. Also, and one of the things they're correcting in the docket, they're taking this map in like the red color, they're mapping it, and they're also mapping the water and sewer districts. So like this is Sammamish Plateau water for the water and sewer, and they have a way to do this online. And I understand that the docket tonight, even if you wanted to pass it, it won't actually get implemented in the comp plan on paper until 2020, but I don't see any reason why the online maps couldn't go forward. So the Planning Commission was interested in that, but they tried to do it as a motion with the docket, and you can't do it as part of the docket because it needs to be done separately. So I'm asking if you believe in online mapping and you think that data we have should be out there, I'd like to see steep slopes layer added. I'd like to see the things for the docket added to the existing tool, and also the streams which are related to the Zaccoos Basin Plan. I know Danica Globalcar has done a lot of work with the GIS person for that, for Ebright and for Zaccoos and for George Davis. We have that layer, but it's not available to the public. I don't see any reason why that could be turned on. So I'm asking you as a council if you could consider a motion, hopefully tonight sometime that's appropriate, where you would say, yes, it makes sense to have the online mapping tools when city staff is ready for it and be able to put it up so it's useful to the public. And then on the second thing on the consent agenda, you have the resolution adoption for the Zaccoos Basin Plan. And Mark Cross, who's a neighbor of mine, he was on council for 8 years and also a former mayor. He had written in an email on the 20th of September, which is the Friday before last Friday. And I just wanted to reiterate, he couldn't come tonight, but he says, let's make sure that the highest ranked projects are budgeted in the 6-year horizon so it isn't just a plan that doesn't get done. and that landslides really need to be mapped throughout the city where they occur. They shouldn't be done just or public or private property or just one of them, because it's information that people really need to know, and you don't have to identify liable parties. There's also a lot of soil types that are related to the landslides, and those are important to know. And you have to protect against the risks of life and property, as well as to protect the functions of things like wetlands and streams. And that we really need to cooperate with the water and sewer districts to make sure that the utilities, including sewer and storm, are in the places where the occupancy permits have been given, which would include areas like Tamarack and Inglewood. So thank you for listening tonight, and I hope you'll consider making a motion and adopting or suggesting or giving direction that we could have the online maps that are available when staff is ready to do that, separate from the dockets. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. City Manager, I don't know if I'm the only one hearing the music, but where is that coming from? It's, oh, it sounded like it was upstairs. Is there anyone else that would like to address the public, or the council this evening, excuse me? Nope, okay. Seeing none, I would entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, the consent calendar is passed. Next, we're going to move on to presentations and proclamations. First, we have a proclamation for Domestic Violence Action Month. And it looks like we have LifeWire board member Rachel Krinsky, who will read that proclamation for us.
Thank you so much. My name is Rachel Krinsky. I'm LifeWire's executive director, and I will read the proclamation, but first I just want to thank the City of Sammamish very much for proclaiming this month Domestic Violence Awareness Month and Domestic Violence Action Month. We use both because we want people to be aware and we want people to do something. And also for all of your support of LifeWire, both financially and otherwise. Proclamation, Domestic Violence Awareness Month. In the City of Sammamish, in recognition of the important work done by survivors, domestic violence programs, and victim service providers, we urge all citizens to actively participate in the scheduled activities and programs sponsored by LifeWire and other community organizations to work toward the elimination of intimate partner violence. Whereas in just one day, across the U.S. and its territories, nearly 75,000 victims of domestic violence sought services from domestic violence programs and shelters. That same day, more than 9,000 requests for service, including emergency shelter, housing, transportation, childcare, and legal representation, could not be provided because programs lacked the resources to meet victims' needs. And whereas the impact of domestic violence is wide-ranging, directly affecting individuals and society as a whole, here in this community, throughout the United States and the world, and whereas racism, homophobia, transphobia, ageism, and discrimination based on physical ability, nationality, or other factors help to perpetuate domestic violence and make finding safety even more difficult for some victims. And whereas the need for safe housing continues to be rated as survivors' most urgent need, and whereas Sammamish joins with others across Washington and the nation in supporting victims of domestic violence, as well as local programs, state coalitions, national organizations, and other agencies nationwide who are committed to increasing public awareness of domestic violence and sending a clear message to abusers that domestic violence is not tolerated in Sammamish. Whereas domestic violence impacts millions of people each year, but it can be prevented. Preventing domestic violence requires the collective voice of power and power of individuals, families, institutions, and systems, each of whose #1 thing, which you can do, adds a valuable and powerful component to transforming our communities. Now, therefore, I, Christy Malcho, Mayor of the City of Sammamish, on behalf of the City Council, hereby do proclaim October 2019 as Domestic Violence Awareness Month. Thank you again very much.
Thank you.
I would like to add that I really appreciated my colleague Mary Ellen's comments about sexual assault, and many of them apply to domestic violence as well. We would like to see much more reporting of domestic violence. It is, similarly to sexual assault, deeply underreported. And one of the most important things for us about October being Domestic Violence Action Month is that regular, everyday people, parents, friends, coworkers, people on the same teams, raise this issue with each other and check in with each other. The most powerful thing that can happen for a survivor of domestic violence is for someone to hear their story and believe them, and it's terrifying to tell someone that. So if any of you know someone who you think might be in an unhealthy relationship, just saying, I'm concerned about you, how are things going, just offering LifeWire's phone number or other resources, but not judging and not expecting a certain course of action in a certain amount of time, and really just being there and staying in the relationship is a very powerful action you can take. And that can be a hard thing to do as someone who loves somebody or cares about them or works with them, because it takes a long time, for a very good reason, for survivors to leave an abusive partner. Leaving is the most dangerous time. That's when most domestic homicides occur. Leaving also involves financial losses, very complicated situations with custody, economic losses. It's a tricky proposition once someone is in a very unhealthy, violent relationship to get out. And so it takes long-term support and caring and patience from everyone involved. But survivors tell us that the most important thing for them and the thing that keeps them going towards safety is having people who will listen and believe. So if you do nothing else during Domestic Violence Action Month, please just talk about domestic violence with other people in your world. Let them know that in your workplace or in your church, given that 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will experience domestic violence in their lifetime, there are people here in this room tonight, and there are people everywhere you go who are needing that listening ear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have a second proclamation this evening. This is Substance Abuse Prevention Month, and I have Alina Harris reading that one.
Good evening. My name is Alina Harris. I'm here on behalf of Influence the Choice. I'm a member of the Sammamish Youth Board, and I'm a senior at Skyline High School, where the staff and students have all been affected by some of the recent news in substance abuse. So, the proclamation for National Substance Abuse Prevention Month. Whereas many of our young people do not develop skills needed to productively go through adolescence substance-free, and whereas substance use can and does negatively impact the development and potential for our youth to succeed, and whereas substance use prevention has a greater impact than later intervention by changing a child's early life path away from maladaptive solutions and towards positive behaviors and productivity. And whereas substance use prevention is an extremely cost-effective model in comparison to later high utilization interventions. In general terms, a saving of up to $10 or more for every dollar spent on effective programming. And whereas the benefits in increasing protective factors while reducing risk factors and engaging social emotional learning provides a universal benefit to all of our youth. And whereas by stopping the drug use before it starts, we can prevent the disease of addiction and create a stronger neighborhoods in our community. Now and therefore, the Mayor, Christy Malchow, on behalf of the Sammamish City Council, does hereby proclaim the month of October 2019 as National Substance Abuse Prevention Month in the City of Sammamish, and calls upon citizens to join in engaging in appropriate programs and activities to promote the comprehensive substance abuse prevention efforts in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next agenda item is a public hearing. This is an ordinance declaring public use and necessity for land and property to be condemned as required for the Issaquah Pine Lake Road, Klahani Boulevard to Southeast 44th Street, Phase 1. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. I'll wait for staff, and I'll turn it over to them for the initial update and presentation. Thank you, Andrew.
Good evening again, Council and Mayor. We're here to hopefully close the public hearing for the ordinance for the condemnation ordinance for the Issaquah Pine Lake project. As you recall, in the last council meeting, we opened the hearing for public comment, and we extended it till this meeting. And hopefully, we can close it and then move to adoption of the ordinance if the council chooses.
Okay, I do have a few signed in. We have, no, I was going to say, okay, I was going to say, there's more than one, so I only have one sheet. This is for the second? Okay. So is there anyone else, is there anyone that would like to address the council on this before we close the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and turn it over to council. Councilmember Stewart.
I move that we adopt the ordinance as written.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I can turn that off, sorry.
Okay, seeing none, all those in favor?
I
Council,
changed my mind.
Councilmember Valderrama?
Yeah, so I'd like to know how much, where is the status of approaching the owners of these properties?
So our consultant has reached out both by email, mail, certified mail, also made calls to both the property owner whose offices are in Denver, Colorado, but also the property manager whose office is in Seattle. So we're right now exchanging, I think, calls back and forth just to begin negotiations. He's also sent letters with the exhibits of the property that we're seeking to acquire.
Okay. Don't see any more lights on, so all those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we have passed it. We do have a second public hearing this evening. This is amendments to the housing elements of the Sammamish Comprehensive Plan to incorporate the 2018 Housing Strategy Sammamish Homegrown. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. As with this one, I will turn it over to staff. And Kelly and Miriam will be doing the initial presentation to the council.
Good evening, City Council. Tonight we'll be discussing the proposed amendments to update the comprehensive plan to incorporate the 2018 housing strategy, which was adopted in early January of this year. And before we go into the changes themselves, I just wanted to do a quick recap of some key dates. So Planning Commission has already reviewed the proposed amendments to the comprehensive plan as part of their review and recommendation of Sammamish Homegrown, which was done in July of 2018. Then on January 15th of 2019, City Council passed Resolution R 2019-818, which adopted Sammamish Homegrown. So tonight, Council will be holding the public hearing to consider amendments to the comprehensive plan, which will update the language of the housing element and the housing element background section to integrate Sammamish Homegrown. One item to note is that Council won't be taking any action tonight, but will instead be deliberating and considering these proposed amendments in early 2020 as part of the Consolidated Annual Amendment Ordinance. So the red line version of the changes to the housing element can be found in Exhibit 1 of your packets, and the proposed changes here are really just to clean up, to remove old language referencing the old plan and then replace it with language about Sammamish Homegrown. And then additionally, the amendment date will be updated to the date that City Council adopts the Consolidated Annual Amendment Ordinance that I mentioned previously, which again should be happening sometime in early 2020. And then the red line changes for the housing element background section can be found in Exhibit 2. The first change is the addition of a page to introduce Sammamish Homegrown and provide a dynamic reference to the full plan. And then the second change is really just an update of the page numbers as a result of adding that page. And then finally, Exhibit A, which is at the very end of the housing element background section, will be removed. Are there any questions?
Does Council have any questions? Councilmember Ross?
Yeah, refresh my memory. The homegrown document is dynamic. It can change at any time by council. So we've connected it to the comp plan.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, I don't see any other questions.
Okay, so I'll hand things back to you to open the public hearing then.
Very good. Okay, so I'm going to open up the public hearing for this item. I don't believe there was anyone signed in, but would anyone like to address council during this public hearing? Nope. Okay, so the question is do we need to close the hearing today or continue the hearing?
We'll need to close the hearing today.
Okay. I do have one question, however, because so with this, we're just adopting by reference the term, basically, homegrown. The one element that I wish we had in the packet was homegrown. For the public to be able to reference, we're having a public hearing on referencing a change, but we didn't provide the document that we're changing in here, so.
Sure.
Councilmember Ross, did you have, no? Okay, very good. We need action by council. Councilmember Ritchie?
So in light of what the mayor said, I think we should extend the public hearing so that we can include the homegrown amendment in the document so that the citizens can review it and then speak to it in public comment. So I move we extend the public hearing. Ellipsis.
Do we have another date where we could extend the public hearing or no?
Not at this time. So you have already approved Sammamish homegrown.
Correct.
This is just a dynamic reference. And yes, I understand it would definitely have been great. There was an oversight on staff's part not to include homegrown in the exhibit package of tonight's agenda item. But comment on Sammamish homegrown has already happened.
Correct.
And you've already officially approved the plan. So this is, again, just a dynamic reference saying, to tie it to the comp plan, as Councilmember Ross mentioned earlier.
So I'm not entirely sure what you need us to do right now.
We need to take action on the
I thought we were
adoption.
taking action.
Actually, you don't need to take
You
action.
don't have to because the formal action won't happen until 2020.
2020, we'll bring it back as a consolidated ordinance. We'll do a reading, and then there will be a formal action at that
So
time.
then I move that we close the public hearing at this
Okay,
time.
we
That
don't
would
need
be
to.
great.
There wasn't a second
Fine,
anyway.
that's all
so,
good.
okay.
Right
All
on.
So I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay. Okay. And then we have a page here. One last public hearing. This is amendments to the introduction section and land use element of the comprehensive plan. Mr. City Manager.
Oh, she gave it to me again.
I did.
Sorry, I'm in La La Land over here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. You'll see we have another PowerPoint for council, and then I'll turn it over to Kelly. Thank you.
Good evening, City Council. Tonight, I'm here to present the proposed technical amendment to the comprehensive plan. I would like to start the presentation with a little background information. In 2018, the City Council approved placing a proposal on the annual docket to make 3 minor corrections to the city's comprehensive plan. On September 5, 2019, Planning Commission reviewed the proposal, held a public hearing, and voted on the recommendation to City Council. Tonight, I will walk you through these corrections and provide Planning Commission's recommendation. The first proposed amendment was to add a legend to Figure LU1 in Volume 2 of the Land Use Element of Comprehensive Plan. Planning Commission recommended this amendment. The second amendment proposed was to update the aquifer susceptibility map to show the boundaries of the North East Sammamish Sewer and Water District and Sammamish Plateau Water. Planning Commission recommended as an alternative to updating the map to instead add a dynamic reference that directs readers to the city's website where the most current mapping and GIS data is available. And lastly, the third proposed amendment was to update the TBP plan acronym, which stands for Trails, Bikeways, and Pathway Plan, to the non-motorized plan. Planning Commission did not recommend this amendment because the non-motorized plan does not exist. Therefore, this would be an incorrect reference within our comprehensive plan. Here you can see a summary of Planning Commission's recommendation for each proposal. City Council will not taking any actions tonight about this project. Instead, you will be deliberating and considering these amendments as a part of consolidated annual amendment ordinance in early 2020. Unless there are any questions, I will turn this back over to Mayor to open the public hearing. Thank you.
Does council have any questions? I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I will open this public hearing. And I do believe we have a few signed in for this one. Mary Wichter, followed by James Eastman.
Well, you were part of what I submitted online. Hi, my name is Mary Wichter. I live at 408 208th Avenue Northeast in Sammamish. And in full transparency, I was the applicant who submitted the docket item, because if you're not in the comp plan, you can't get regulations. So the map is in the comp plan, but it was missing the legend. We now have the legend that says it's steep slopes in gray, that the wetlands are in green, and that parks are in the greenish yellow. And that happens to be right next to the language that says the natural features of Sammamish need to be identified, recognized, and preserved, and steep slopes should limit development. So that's very important. And then on the aquifer susceptibility map, that's what they're going to do, the online version. So the comp plan itself is just going to refer to the online maps. And like I said, in a separate motion from this docket item, I'd like you to say that, yes, we'd like to have whatever data is available as online maps. You can't do it as part of the docket because Planning Commission tried to do that. You have to do it separately. And there are streams and steep slopes and these things that they're working on for the replacement of this map. And then for the third thing, the Trails, Bikeways, and Pathways Plan, that does exist. There is a link to it. And in the email I sent in today, there is a link. I think it's 178 pages. It explains the plan. And I believe Deputy Mayor Moran had talked about it at one meeting about the value of the plan and the meaning of it. And the non-motorized portion means that's the residential trails that aren't along roads. And then the motorized portion is the sidewalks that are along the roads. And those are they're both there. They're kind of being done under the TMP, the Transportation Master Plan. So they're there. So they're not making the change at this time. But there was a lot of question about it and what were the plans. And James Eastman had actually written in and said, hey, I wanted this clarified. Deputy Mayor Moran had wanted it as well. And then Angie Fesser had actually written the statement clarifying that. And then I also read through what the comp plan has in it. And I gave you 2 pages from that are in the transportation plan that talk about the non-motorized plan. So it is all in there. It's just they kind of changed the name and then they kind of didn't. But the plans actually exist and they're good. So it clarified it. And then I just would like to thank the city, particularly the staff, Sarah and Kelly and Miriam and the other people. A lot of work was done so that people could submit dockets and have even small changes made. Sammamish Municipal Code Title 24 was updated to 24A to make the process a lot better, and that process is getting tested. You'll see those dockets come forth in the next meeting. The city staff actually met with me. We talked about things. I met with the GIS person and got to see the work she was doing. Sarah actually demonstrated it at the Planning Commission meeting, and I think we've all learned a lot from it. Kelly was even saying, hey, sometimes you have to update the glossary and other things. So it's a really good lesson in what we need to do when we update things. I appreciate your time and support in moving this forward. I believe you can close the public hearing, and it won't come back to you till 2020, but if you could do that motion for the online maps, I'd be so happy. Thanks.
Mr. Eastman.
James Eastman, 196th Avenue Northeast. About 3 years ago, I ran across the Trails, Bikeways, and Paths plan. I was pretty excited about it, and I went to the city. I'm like, hey, look, this is cool. I got all these trails you guys want to put in through my property. Let's talk about this. And they said, well, actually, that plan doesn't exist anymore. We're dissolving it, and we're going to put it in these 2 other plans. I'm like, oh, okay. So are those trails there anymore? They're like, no, that doesn't exist. And so I showed up at the Balmoral condemnation hearing a couple months ago, and it's like, hey, these trails have been on the TB blah, 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 whatever, Bikeways Pass plan since 2004. I'm like, wait a sec. I thought that didn't exist anymore. So then I emailed Angie, and the response I got was around 2016, there was a discussion to update the plan, named the non-motorized plan, but it was decided to divide between the Parks Recreation, Open Space Plan, the Transportation Master Plan. Both those plans are slated to begin in 2017, rather than do a third public planning effort and risk public engagement fatigue. It was split between the 2 larger plans. The component of all right-of-way non-motorized transportation is included in the TMP, and all the non-right-of-way public facility non-motorized transportation options are found in the 2018 Pro Plan. So I like The Simpsons. I'm a little bit like Homer Simpson. One of the episodes, he says, every time I learn something new, it pushes some old stuff out of my brain. So I'm actually glad you guys didn't include homegrown in the packet, because it was 400 pages already. I think homegrown would have pushed it over 500. You put the PPP plan in there and probably would have took it up to 700 or 800. So even if you don't even want to listen to me now, you just tune out, because it's like you do these deep dives and the devil's in the details, and you like dig into all this stuff. And sometimes you wonder if maybe it's just like so convoluted and it doesn't quite align, and we're trying to just update the stupid comp plan and just update the reference when we're trying to maintain the Trails, Bikeways, and Paths plan, and then there's 2 other documents that got to align to it at all times. Well, it's like, well, how's that going to work? If we change one, which we haven't even done yet, then do we have to go change this one? Like, why do we have 2 plans tying to another plan? And then you read through the packet, and it's even more confusing. And I just tune out. I think that, man, I'm not going to remember where my car's parked. I'll probably like learn how to, forget where I'm going. And if you're like Homer Simpson, you won't even know how to drive home. So, anyways, my recommendation for council is to ask staff if there needs to be further clarity. Or maybe Mr. Eastman is just lazy and just doesn't want to put the brain power to figure all this out. So, I'm okay if they say, yeah, he's a little lazy. Everything makes sense on lines. But if there is a little bit of confusion there, then on the long-term plan in the parking lot, I noticed there's quite a bit of space under the bag policy to add stuff. So if you could add the either get rid of the Trails, Bikeways, and Paths plan because you already have the other 2, or make sure that they align and there's a clear-cut plan and everything makes sense, and maybe in another year or so, just check it. Because I don't want to be the guy 20 years from now saying, look, you're condemning my property. Hey, it's been on there for 20 years. And I'm like, well, it was this, and it was that, and it was this, and it was gone. It's like, no, one or the other. Thanks.
Thank you. I did watch the Homer Simpson clip. In case anyone else didn't, I watched why he forgot. You didn't mention that.
I did watch that.
Is there anyone else that would like to address the council for this public hearing? Okay. I will close this public hearing. And it sounds like action is forthcoming in 2020. Thank you. Okay. Next item under unfinished business is a discussion on the YMCA update. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council. Angie's coming to help with some questions, if there are any. So at this point, if you notice in your packet, there was about, I don't know, 3 or 4 pages. And what this is when we met with the YMCA after our last meeting, we met with them, talked to them about what's going on. They actually wanted to, there were some questions that were asked. They actually wanted to look at answering some of these questions. So they went back and listened to the tape. And what you have on your packet is the answers to the questions that were brought up. So they wanted that opportunity to answer those questions before we talked about basically, you know, any contract amendments or anything, but they wanted to make sure that the council understands their position. So that's what's in front of you. So I guess at this point, there was a question going around about the, what is it, the EMS report, which is basically the capital replacement plan. They're one and the same, right, Angie? Yeah, they're one and the same. So we talked about that. On the front page, you'll notice a line there that says, it's item number 2, and it says, the MG report, which was the basis for our multi-year capital replacement plan, was submitted to and accepted by the City of Sammamish on 2/28/19. That is not true. We have not received the plan back from the YMCA. So basically, I'll read you some snippets that Angie had put together. And it says, the YMCA submitted facilities condition assessment on February 28th, 2019. That's when they submitted it, okay? On April 4th, 2019, after staff looked at it, made some comments, red lines, showed it to a landscape architect and others, gave it back to Dave Meyer of the YMCA, a hard copy of the plan with all the comments on it. And right now, we have no record of receiving a revised and final copy of the plan. So we don't have that yet from what we understand. So that has not been submitted back from the Y. So Angie, if you want to add to this, but Angie has talked to the YMCA, am I correct? And if you want to add to that a little bit.
Right, and I did send out an email today kind of clarifying that a majority of the changes that the staff had were kind of grammatical, just fine tuning. It's not going to necessarily impact the calculations of the values that they generated out of the report, but it was kind of tweaking some of the pieces. The staff that did review the report were the 2 city staff who were on the project from design through construction. So we had a licensed landscape architect and an architect who oversaw that entire project. They were the ones who actually went through the report and made those revisions and comments. We gave that back to the Y. They need to make those changes and submit it back to us this time.
Okay, thank you. So that takes care of that portion that was asked in this report. So they answered the question, so I guess I'll turn it back over to council now. And I'm kind of looking, and Angie and I both are kind of looking, how would you like us to proceed with knowing these answers to the questions? Is there 3 or 4 things you'd like me to specifically deal with the Y and ask them about doing certain contract language amendments? Now that you've had these answers to the question, we kind of need some direction going forward now that they've had this opportunity. So I'll turn it back over to you, Mayor and Council.
Councilmember Hornish.
Okay, thanks. I've got a lot of questions on this report, which is really nothing more than what Councilmember Ross and I were fully aware of how they're doing this, but I want to clarify that nobody is questioning that the Y is a good service for our citizens as currently being provided. The questions we have are focused on the reporting as to the accounting and the methodology that the Y is using, that they said they would report on an annual basis, which the first time we got was 1.5 years ago, and we're still in this quagmire as to their methodology. So let's focus on the methodology, and let's focus first. We'll focus on the EMG report. And I don't know if this is a question for Angie or for you, Rick, okay, but I'm glad we clarified that we have not accepted their report, although in our emails, I was very confused as to the report versus the plan. The report that you discussed on the EMG, I think, is a basis for a capital replacement plan. However, as they describe here, I've got 3 issues with that paragraph 2. Number 1, why are they assuming a replacement value in 2009 that they're going to have to replace the value over 25 years. I question that assumption. The whole EMG report is to say, here's what you're going to need for the next 10, 20 years for capital replacement. They take one line out of page 2 of the report, and they say, hey, the current is called CRV, current replacement value. In the middle of page 2, it's about 6 words, and that's the only thing they take from this report. That current replacement value was calculated by EMG to figure out what kind of condition the facility is in. They do these type of reports on old facilities. They do them on new facilities. They then look at what the current replacement cost that they're estimating is as a percentage of the current replacement value of the facility. And as you would expect, as a new facility, it's very low, which means our facility is in very good condition. We shouldn't have to spend too much money for a capital replacement over the next 10, 20 years. That's the only reason the current replacement value was calculated. The Y took that one line out of this 64-page report and applied a very dubious methodology. 2.5% inflation rate I can agree with. For 25 years, maybe those are kind of negotiable terms and everything. And assumed a future value of $35 million and then straight lined that over the 25 years. That makes no logical sense to use current dollars to reserve for a future value. So that's the number 2 issue. Then they talk about it being able to change, and they don't talk about how, why, when, and where. And I guess I got 5 issues about this. They don't even talk about, and then this is the issue that we had discussed before, they have a reserve that they're reserving for using this, I think, I'm just going to say, erroneous methodology, in my opinion. They're reserving it, and it's over-reserved based on what the EMG report is saying. And so my question that I had to them, and this is so everybody understands where I'm coming from, the question I had for the why in my discussions is, if you've over-reserved and if this is terminated at the end of 10 years or the end of 20 or 25, whenever it's terminated for the operating agreement between us, the city, and the Y, what happens to that money that you then have reserved? And they go, we don't know. When I go, well, where is the money now? And they go, oh, it's not earmarked. It's at Seattle in our coffers in downtown Seattle. I don't even know if we'll ever get that money back if it's over-reserved, which is why I don't think we should be using their methodology. We have to push back on that methodology so they're not reserving it. I've got probably 20 minutes to talk about this. I don't know if we want to talk through all the issues I have with this, but that's the first issue, and we have to understand that the revenue minus expenses is what then goes into the buckets, of which the first is the capital maintenance reserves, the second of which is the rainy day 2 months operating fund, and the third is the extra that we then funnel back into facilities for our citizens. But until we get that first expense right, I'm sorry, and this is kind of another issue, if you will, going back to the 3rd page of their report on 6 and 7 as to what's included as to revenue and staff. That's the revenue and expenses. This number 2 paragraph capital report is all about that first bucket and how much is being reserved. But even before you get there, you got to talk about what's included in expenses, what's included in revenue, and they change from the first report to the second report as to what revenue is included. So I'm not even sure we have an agreement as to what revenue is included. So to make it a little bit clearer, let's turn to the paragraph 6. I think you or whoever is doing this discussion needs to understand what revenue is included, what revenue is not included. Number 7, current staff, what expenses on the staff side are included, what expenses on the staff side are not included. It's a really confusing memo that they put forth that says 350 full-time, part-time, and seasonal, but only 271 are in the Sammamish Community Center, and we're not including anybody else but the community center, so why do they even talk about the 350? From what we saw before, they excluded the revenue in their changes, but they did not exclude the expenses of those heads the employees for the revenue that they were no longer including in the financial report that they were giving back to us. That needs to be clarified and understood so that we know what the revenue is on the Sammamish Community Center minus the expenses with a methodology that makes sense and we all agree to. And I think there is some discussion to understand that. But you can't just say, they just can't tell me that we're only included these without us verifying that. We need to fully understand that, who's included, what's not included. And that gets to the expenses on that second bucket. Now you're back up into paragraph 4 of the interest. They are deducting interest before we get to that first bucket, capital reserve, on the $5 million that they contributed. They're deducting interest on money they're borrowing and the capital cost of equipment that they own that they agreed that they would contribute to our community center. For them to get an interest carrying charge was not agreed upon. They should not be deducting that from expenses, in my opinion. They have a reference in paragraph 4. It says, we allocate, the second sentence in paragraph 4 says, we allocate our long-term debt interest expense to all our operating branches. So they are allocating their bond expenses in Seattle for their whole region on a revenue allocation basis to Sammamish expenses. I'm not sure that makes sense. I'm not sure it doesn't make sense, but we did not agree to that. It's not addressed, so I don't know whether we agreed to it or not. We need to get that clarified. I don't think it makes sense that they're operating it. They allocate long-term debt interest expense to all our operating branches. This is not an operating branch. This is the Sammamish Community Center, of which they are operating. It's not a YMC operating branch. That's a key distinction I think we have to make in our discussion. 5 goes into that revenue and expenses that I highlighted before you even get down to the bucket 1. And then lastly for tonight, and I don't know where we go with this, but I don't think the takeaway from my point of view, this memo doesn't help at all in our discussions move this forward. But I really like what they say, that they kind of distinguish at the very end of the report that the board that they're talking about is not the board that has governance, responsibility, and accountability. That rests with the YMCA of Greater Seattle Association Board of Directors. That's our equivalent as council that we need to negotiate with and get this contract clear and straightened out to where we all agree to what the financial reporting and the allocation of the revenue and the excess revenue minus expenses for the 3 buckets is fair and reasonable, and we agree to it. One last point. Coming back to the EMG report, I want to stress that our operating agreement says we get to approve the capital replacement value. If we accept this EMG report, I can probably agree to what EMG is saying would be the capital reserve that we need to do, but it's not the $18 million inflated over 25 years and then straight line over 25 years. We've got to make that clear that we do not accept that, but we will accept what a third party says you need to reserve for, and then give some comfort that if we don't reserve enough or reserve too much, what happens to that money or how we give money back to help with the capital replacement. But the $18.5 million doesn't fly.
Thank you, Councilor.
Councilmember Ross.
Councilmember Hornish summarized it pretty good. I think we need to think about what is the next steps. And I'd like to go back to the first comment by Councilmember Hornish. This is not an operating review at all whatsoever. It's not about the services that Y provides. It's merely us as a council doing our job, custodianship of the our entitlement to reserves and sharing in the reinvestment of those reserves into our facility if they're a surplus, and that's the bucket 3. So there's many accounting issues shared by Councilmember Hornish, and they are complex. And from an accountant, it's very intuitive to me, but for most, it's probably not intuitive. So I think what we really need to do is have a very concise summary of the issues outlined by Councilmember Hornish and reference the revenue and expense statement and highlight that. I think the council needs to make a decision and vote on the next steps forward. And I think we need to do a financial statement 101 and how it applies to the why and what are our observations, so we can level set both the council, the rest of the council, and the public. From that, I think we can start moving forward. I do know there is probably some disagreements between the Y and Councilmember Hornish and I in our perspectives, and that's okay. Let's bring those to service, and to the extent we can't resolve or we disagree, it's okay to agree to disagree. And to those points, I would recommend those points and those points only that we don't agree on, we bring forward on dispute resolution section 33. But I want this to be a very move forward reasonably quickly, cooperatively. The Y staff is outstanding in working with us. We just need to be able to come to a resolution of this once and for all. I think the end result will be some clarifications, what the expectations of the existing contract. And then if it requires an addendum, I think that'd be outstanding, because that would clarify what do you expect on your annual financial report. How do you reserve and account for surpluses? How do you show draws from that surplus to fund capital acquisitions? So it's a full accounting and transparency. There's Moss Adams, I think I recall, is their auditor, and they are fully compliant in accounting rules from the Seattle entity standpoint. This is really a pro forma statement that's not audited, and all we're asking is for a financial statement that properly discloses the amount of surplus that the city and the Y together reinvest into the facility.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so I think that to move forward, I sent an email back on April 6th where I tried to outline what I saw as the questions, the outstanding questions, and a way to move forward on each one of those. So just to summarize for the public, the agreement calls for 3 basically reserve accounts. 1 reserve account for the maintenance, intended to be for capital expenditures that are major items above $5,000 per, anything above $5,000. So that would be for things like the HVAC, the pool, big items. The second one is the reserves for operations, which is supposed to be 2 months of operations. And then the third one would be if there are, and the agreement says in the unlikely event that there are additional funds, that they should be set aside, and there would be a mutually agreed upon course of action for those funds. I believe that the agreement was set up to make sure that the city of Sammamish, and thus the residents of Sammamish, have no risk or in liability should there be expensive maintenance issues. And as we've seen in other communities, things like pools over the long haul can be very costly, and most communities are shutting down their pools once they have to be revised. So moving forward, I outlined that I think in order to minimize issues with new financial reports, we should agree on who should determine the amount needed in capital maintenance and operations reserves. Given that we want our investment to be properly maintained and thus protected, I'm comfortable with a more conservative, AKA higher number here. So the EMG report, as I read through all of the documentation, was not, the very initial one used the full amount because they had not actually gotten the detailed report back. Once the detailed report came back, they were estimating $5.4 million to be set aside for those big maintenance items. Now, we can negotiate that and we can have it be smaller or greater, but in order to protect, so we, the city of Sammamish, still own that facility. So it seems to me the more conservative approach would be to have a higher amount in that maintenance fund to ensure that if something big happened, it could be replaced so that our investment comes back to us in the same condition that it was given in. There is another figure of $3.8 million that one could use. Actually, I apologize, it's $3.3 million in 2018 dollars, or the $5.4 million in future value. Again, I think I'm comfortable either way, but I think that, again, going more conservative protects our investment more. That means that at the end of the 25 years, if there's still money in that, then that comes back to us. So that's not a problem. It comes back to us, meaning in the mutually agreed upon investment into the facility. The second part of that is that I suggest that the Y include 100% of expenses incurred at and by the facility, including maintenance. This will also include some prorated amount for regional FTEs and other YMCA expenses that are allocated across all facilities per their established methodology. Also, it would include only expenses for included revenues, except for those prorated expenses. I think that's fair, right? The management of the greater YMCA is still in part contributing to the management of this facility. So I don't think it's unreasonable to include that prorated amount. In other points that were brought up in section 7H, the board, we need to confirm that it's meeting the terms of the agreement, setting the strategic direction for facility operations, fundraising, outreach, and oversight to the branch. Section 8A3, the Y shall develop an annual maintenance plan, and those need to be subject by review and comment by the city. We know that, and I think that's the plan that's in dispute. So I think we need to confirm that this plan has been developed and share it with the city. If not, let's get that done and let's get it reviewed and provide the comments and get it approved. And then we also, though, need to realize that we are already, as a city, doing a monthly punch list. So we have a member of our staff that goes over there monthly and walks the facility and comes up with a monthly checklist. And as I understand in talking to all parties involved, it's a very thorough punch list, and that the YMCA deals with those issues on the punch list. So we just need to make sure that, I think that's part of that plan, and let's just get that done. Section 8E2, the Y shall develop a capital replacement plan that will be subject to review and approval by the city. We have identified that this has not happened. So again, ask the Y to create the capital replacement plan using the EMG report as input. But also, as the report states, it was not 100% inclusive. So I believe that this plan should be updated periodically, as it appears that the EMG report is an estimate based on industry standards, and the Y should update with actuals, as actual facility history informs actual wear and tear needs. Section 8FI, the Facilities Committee, and again, this is all an email, Mr. City Manager.
Thank you.
This committee is up and running. Ask for meeting minutes and monthly walkthrough punch list to be provided. I think if we can provide that clarity, then we can put to bed some of those concerns. Additional items that were brought up here, again, I already brought up the fact that I think we should be using a more conservative number for that maintenance, for those big items. Again, they currently have $3 million in reserves, which is less than the $5.4 million, which would be from the EMG report, but let's just agree on a figure. And then after that, they would have their 2 months of operations expenses. And then let's see if there's any money left over. Last I saw in terms of financials, if they put $5.4 million in the first fund and they have to put 2 months of operations, there are no excess funds yet, because those funds would not be fully funded as of yet. And I think even if they use the more conservative number at $3.3 million, there still aren't excess funds yet between those two. In terms of the interest expense, right? The Y contributed $5 million to the building of this. Interest expense is a legitimate expense, as I understand it, so I'm not sure why that's a concern. So we could get some additional information on that, but interest expense is a legitimate expense. And then questioning other expenses, including payroll, taxes, benefits, childcare, summer camp expenses. Again, I suggest that the Y include 100% of expenses incurred at and by the facility. This would, again, include some prorated amounts for regional FTEs. and other YMCA expenses that are allocated across all facilities. I don't think that's unreasonable. So I think if we can address those, let's take that if people are agreeable, right? So I make a motion that we address these points that I've outlined in the email, and then once those are addressed, see if there are still any open points to go forward.
Second.
Can you restate your motion, please?
Sure. So I move, and I can share this email again with council. I've sent it out twice. I have 4 points, I guess, addressed here. So everything that I went through, section 7H, 8A3, 8E2, and 8F1, that we address those points with the YMCA. And once those points are addressed, we see if there are still gaps between what the YMCA is doing and what the council believes should be getting done. But I feel like these are specific action items that we can go and close on. I feel like this has been churning for a while, and I'd like to see us take action on some specific points and see if we can close those gaps.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second, so we're now addressing the motion on the floor. Councilmember Ritchie?
Yep. So I support Councilmember Hornish and Councilmember Ross in their interest, in their ongoing interest in trying to find answers to these questions. I support Councilmember Stewart's effort to try to, if I can, narrow the focus down to some salient key points. And I would like to add that, at least in my opinion, us sitting up here and perseverating on this for a long time repeatedly doesn't really get anywhere. And it just kind of turns into a, frankly, it's out of my bailiwick. I mean, we're talking about accounting procedures that I don't really understand. So I would like to review something other than this document. I would like it if we could have a study session specifically set up for this issue. Invite the members of the Greater Seattle YMCA that would be the people that would be responsible to answer for this. Maybe EMG should come as well. I mean, I think we should invite the members. Let's sit down and have a round table like we do for our study sessions and hash these things out. And if we can have Councilmember Stewart's questions presented early on, Councilmember Ross and Councilmember Hornish, who are, adept at this and they've done the research on this, I think they should include their questions. We all should as well. But then let's get it together in a room together. Let's hash it out over a couple hours. Let's figure out where we can get some things figured out. It just, more to Councilmember Hornish's point when we first started, it seems like, I think he used the term, just a quagmire. I agree. And my interest here is to try to get out of the quagmire. I definitely think there are relevant questions that are being asked and that we are not getting the answers that we need for good reason. And I think that part of it's how we're asking, and part of it is the way that the Greater Seattle YMCA is set up. So I think it's I guess my amendment is that we attach these questions to a date certain, to be answered in a date certain, or information presented at a specific date certain in this room with the Greater Seattle Y, so that we can all sit down and get this hashed out at a meeting, not an exchange of emails, but an exchange in person.
Okay. Second.
Okay, so we now have an amendment, and the amendment has been seconded. So now we are discussing the amendment. Councilmember Hornish.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out, you said there's 4 components to the primary motion. I will address the amendment. I think a study session is a good idea, but I want to kind of go back to the original. So if we want to vote on the amendment first, I can come back to those questions to clarify what the primary motion is.
Okay.
Well, I will defer till after the amendments have been voted on.
Okay. Mr. City Manager.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. Thank you, Councilor Hornish. I think if this amendment does pass and we have the meeting, maybe the original motion doesn't even need to come back, because then we can get together and bring the questions to this study session that included what you have, Councilor Ross, others, Councilor Stewart has, and we can bring all that together and just ask those questions in person. Like I said, going back and forth like this, it just takes time. But if we meet and we can do that, maybe the amendment takes care of all that. We have the meeting and we bring everything to the meeting and talk about it then, because in a study session, everything is allowable. And then once we come to the conclusion, then we can decide what to do after that. That's just my comments. Thank you.
Yes, Councilmember Valderrama.
I'm supportive of the motion and the amendment into it. I mean, we have a great partnership going on here. We have over 20,000 members of our city. Over 1/3 our cities are members at the YMCA. It's great that we want to be fiscally responsible custodians of the funds on there, and I agree with that. But I think there's an initial premise that is erroneous here, and Councilmember Ross had referred to both him and Hornish as saying sharing of reserve surplus. And I don't know of any such language that exists in that agreement saying that there will be sharing of reserve surplus. If there is, I'd like to see that language coming forward. I do know that when
are we talking about the amendment
agreement in 2012, that the city was specifically concerned about that this would lose money.
State your point.
Are we talking about the amendment, or are we just talking in general about the why? But I don't.
Well, so what I'd like to know is first, the language of it, is it there? And would we also be opening ourselves up as custodians on this to the why coming back to us, say we'd like to start sharing these big costs.
We need to stick to the amendment.
Well, this is what I'm asking for specifically in this workshop that we're going to have, that would we be possibly open the city up to liabilities of sharing costs that are now incurred, that are 7 figures there, and to losses that they could incur, which was what the city never wanted to be involved in. If we're asking them to start sharing at some future time where it doesn't exist, because it says on point number 1, section 11, it is not anticipated that there will be a surplus once these are funded. So I'd like to have that as part of this workshop as well, asking directly. If you're going to change the agreement into discussions, I'm sure they'd love to be able to stick it to us. Thank you.
Okay. I haven't had an opportunity to talk here. I just want to make 2 points. First, the amendment on the floor is that we want to discuss these questions at a date certain with the Seattle YMCA. I'm supportive of the amendment so long as we can ask all of our questions and not just those limited by the original motion. Absolutely. I would hope that, I mean, I feel like the amendment actually should be its own standalone, because if we pass the motion and then the motion, pass the amendment, but then the motion fails because the motion on the floor is not centric to all of our questions. It is just the ones that Councilmember Stewart brought up specifically, and I would prefer that our study session, if you will, with the Seattle Y is all-encompassing, so we can get everything done, because I agree with what's been said. We go round and round and round. We will be far more effective in the room with the people that have the answers in theory.
Mayor, may I withdraw my motion so that we can have just the amendment be the motion?
Perfect.
I'm happy to do that.
Okay. Do you want to restate it as a formal motion? Councilman Ritchie, thank you.
I move that we schedule a study session at a date certain to include the YMCA of Greater Seattle, this city council, and a public meeting, so any interested citizens of Sammamish can attend, but it be in a study session format, so it's a little bit more informal. And all questions, including Councilmember Stewart's, including Councilmember Hornish and Councilmember Ross, and including anything that comes up through any kind of other emails to the city manager, anyone on the council, I want everyone to have a moment to be able to express their concerns and to have the YMCA express their beliefs and their accounting procedures in an open setting at a date certain, at a public hearing, a public meeting, public study session in this chamber at date certain.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. I'd like to offer an amendment if I can.
I do too.
Yeah, sorry, because I don't think we want to say at a date certain. I think by a date certain, because we need to be able to engage the YMCA, and we may not be able to set that date here. So if we say by a date certain, then it gives us some flexibility.
I would like to amend my motion to say by a date certain.
Wonderful. I'll withdraw my amendment, and I'll second your motion. Okay. Councilmember Ross.
Well, I was going to I'll stay focused on the motion. I was going to answer Ramiro, Councilmember Valderrama, but we'll talk
Yes,
offline.
on the motion.
We'll talk off.
Councilmember Stewart.
I hate to do this, but I'd like to offer an amendment to that to say that for those who already have questions, that they submit those questions in writing so that the YMCA can be prepared to answer them, because I would hate for us to have the study session and then not have answers to some of our questions and then it just linger on.
Second.
Yeah.
All right. Amendment's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Ross, do you have?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I was going to say the same thing. I'd also like us to look for duplication of questions, because I could tell we got to go one issue at a time, methodically down the list. We've resolved this one, check. So yes, let's get it documented to everybody in advance, remove duplications, and agree on if there is a duplication. And I think that'd be far more productive.
Okay. So the amendment.
Can I offer an amendment?
Pardon?
Can I offer an amendment as to the date certain? I would like to put a stake in the ground as to October 15th. But I'm open to going that a little bit later, but I think this needs to be addressed. Actually what I'll do is by the end of October will be my proposed amendment for the date certain.
Mr. City Manager, do you want to comment on that just for reference for everyone?
Yeah. Like all of you, I want to see this thing get resolved, right? So I'm coming into this with a number of meetings. I'm coming into this with you've had meetings with the YMCA. So I'm with you guys. I want to get this resolved, so we can go our happy way. I just think that by the end of October is going to be a little too soon. We have mid-bike coming up. We have a couple other things. We have urban forest management. We have a number of things. We do have an event we need to go to for awareness. So if I may, can we, I'm thinking of going to be a special meeting, special study session, but I'd like to do that in November, if that's amenable to everybody and if that's okay, so we can get through October, get through the election process, and then we can have this meeting and do the study session. And like I said, I don't have a problem if it's a special meeting. We can do different hours, but I'll ask the council as we go. But I would like a little bit of leeway, if that's possible with the council, to do it sometime in November. And if Councilor Hornish wants to say by mid-November and put a date on it, I will work toward that date. And if there's a problem or something comes up, I can ask the council for a couple extra days. How does the middle of November sound for time?
Councilmember Hornish.
I have concerns because I've been trying to push this along for the last 6 months since you've joined the city of Sammamish, Rick. I think it's time to do something sooner rather than later. The concern I really have is if we can't resolve these issues, which I tend to think we won't in our study session with the Y, because I've been dealing with it for 18 months. The dispute resolution, paragraph 33 under the operating agreement, if we have to then go down the formal route, we have to then submit a formal question to the Y. They then have 15 days to respond, and we have 15 days to respond, and then we have another meeting, and then we try to agree, and then we bring in a mediator, and if that can't get resolved at that point, then it goes into litigation. That's going to take a lot of time. I am not amenable to the mid-November because I think that's going to be too late. And I think we can't just kick this down the road. I think this is a huge priority for our citizens, as to $1 million a year that I think that could be used to give our citizens even better services. And we've pushed it off for 1.5 years. I think we need to lean forward and do it by October 30th.
Okay, so the amendment is by October 30th.
But that's his amendment.
Yes, I need a second.
That's my motion.
Motion, that's his motion, yes.
I second it.
We can't have a new motion. We have a motion on the floor.
No,
It's
to
an
be an
amendment.
I second the
Okay, we
amendment.
have a second. So, okay, do we have discussion on this amendment, the October 30th? Councilmember Ross? Okay, oh, Councilmember Ritchie.
So there's been a lot of numbers thrown around. There's been a lot of people looking at this for a long time, or at least several council members looking at this for a long time. I do not think we should be concerned about the legal process or the dispute resolution process timing. I think that by having a study session as soon as possible with a marker out there of mid-November gives us a chance to prepare questions, to get those questions submitted to the YMCA, to give them time to respond, and to have them sitting in this room in an attempt to short circuit or stop any formal dispute resolution process that could take, agree with Councilmember Hornish, weeks, months, long time. My intention in this motion and my support for a date in November is because it is already October 1st. I mean, to have all these things thrown together with mid-buy and everything the city manager said, I think is a hurried process. I recognize that there have been council members, specifically Hornish and Ross, that have put a significant amount of time into this. I respect that a lot. But I'm also cognizant that we're asking for to speak to a new group of people now, not the people that put this 3-page document together, but a new group of people that might be, hopefully, will be able to give us the answers that we need to avoid dispute resolution, and that prolonged, appealed, back and forth, litigated process could possibly be avoided. That is my goal in having a study session in this room. I think giving an additional 2 weeks is reasonable. I trust the city manager to do this with all possible haste. And if we do get a date before then, we will have it before then. If there is any reason that it can't be by then, we'll have the information from the city manager. We're trying to speak to people that we don't know their schedules. And I think it's important that we try to provide some level of flexibility here, recognizing that we're asking people that we have not spoken to before about accounting procedures that we have questions about to come sit in a room with us in our city, the freedom to be able to schedule that appropriately and come with answers. I think that's an appropriate thing to do. So I support November 15th as a date, so I do not support the amendment to the motion.
Councilmember Valderrama.
So I also do not support the amendment to the motion, just because, as it was stated, we are in October. We are constantly told how amicable the relationship, what a great partnership is. So why do we keep constantly raising issue of disputes, mediations, and dates on that? It is October 1st. I think it's reasonable because you not only have to get the Y staff and the greater Y staff coordinated with us, but we constantly talk about our own staff being overworked here, and then you're now throwing the burden on them trying to pull together something quickly. I think let's pull it together at the time that's been given, as has been mentioned. As this goes forward, if it can be moved forward, fine, but let's look at tentatively the 15th, and remember, this is a great relationship that's been going forward here, and let's assume that we're going to continue in an amicable fashion. All of this may be resolved at that point and should be resolved given the past history with this organization. Thank you.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, Councilmember Hornish, I appreciate your desire to move this along quickly. I do think that looking at the fact that we have to, as council, get all of our questions submitted, and then the staff would have to reconcile, remove all the duplicates, get those to the Y, and that we'd want the Y to be able to have responses ready for those at the study session, that to say by, where it could be earlier than that date, that I don't think this 2 weeks is going to make or break anybody. And I think that if our city manager is asking for that time, I think that we owe him giving him that leeway with the understanding that he will make it happen as quickly as is reasonably possible. So I would respectfully ask you to change your amendment to be mid-November and to allow that. Oh, that's the original one. To withdraw your amendment, just because I don't know that it's worth arguing over 2 weeks, knowing that we'll all work as quickly as possible.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
Councilmember Hornish, if I remember correctly, most of these questions, YMCA has seen numerous times. And a Councilmember Stewart has put in, you said you've put yours in twice.
Well, no, only to council members Ross and Hornish, and never got response back on those. So I don't know that mine have
you
ever gone
presented
to the Y.
Councilmember or Deputy Mayor Morales.
So my question is are we dealing with new people at the YMCA?
Yep.
Are you looking at me to answer?
I think she's looking
Yeah,
at
I'm
Angie.
looking, Angie, maybe you can help me. Are we dealing with new people at the YMCA that would be working with us on this?
So currently, we have been meeting with the COO, the CFO, and the branch director.
Okay.
The only person other than that would be the CEO, who we have not had a conversation with. There is a new CEO of the Y. And I would say maybe one other staff out of the finance department.
Okay.
So I would imagine 3 existing staff and then 2 additional would probably who we
Okay, so that we're not talking about a bunch of new people. We're talking 2 new ones.
Probably, yeah.
And we're talking about questions that are 18 months old. So we're not talking.
I mean, there are some questions that they have not seen yet. For example, the questions from Councilmember Stewart have not been passed to the Y. So those questions that Councilmember Stewart asked were of other council members. So, but we can take those and bundle those and put a packet together for the council, or I'm sorry, for the YMCA to help them prep for the study session.
Okay, I guess my thought on this is I would like to see it done as soon as possible as well. Whether it be the end of October or, the beginning of November. I would like it done tomorrow personally, but I don't get my way. So I think these questions, this has been on the plate for a very long time. These are not going to be a surprise to them. I think that, we've had a good partner, a good working relationship with them as far as working with the YMCA as far as the financials. It has not been a good working relation. We've been going back and forth with them for 18 months. So we've got 2 different relationships with them, the working in and how we work with the Y itself, and then the financial one. So those are 2 different groups of people. I hate to put this off, only because I think that enough time has been spent on this. So this is not a surprise to them at all.
Okay, in hopes of getting us off of this particular topic, I'm going to highlight the fact that the only date we have in all of these motions is October 30th. I'm going to be supporting it so that we can move on with this. If our city manager cannot get it by October 30th, I guarantee you he will come back to us and let us know we can't, and we can adjust it then. So to get us moved on, I hope that we can. All the lights are off. I know Councilmember Hornish has one more vote, or one more comment, but I'm hoping we can move off of this topic and move on with this meeting. So, Councilmember Hornish?
Fair point. It is the same people. The questions that Councilmember Stewart are raising are not questions. They're proposals as to how to address the questions. So I don't think there's any new information for these people to answer questions that we can have at the study session.
Okay. So the amendment on the floor is by October 30th. That is what we're voting on right now. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. By a vote of 5-2, by October 30th.
I will try to get it done, and I will work hard to get that done.
Okay, we have another amendment, and that was to add all the questions in advance. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, you need to get your questions in advance.
Get them to me, please.
And the motion as amended now, I think we essentially passed it, as to get that study session with the Seattle YMCA.
Yep.
With your questions in advance by October 30th. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, by a vote of 7-0, we've moved that forward.
Mayor, I have one question.
Sure.
And this is to the city manager. What date do you need those questions from council in your inbox so that you can get this done before October 30th?
I'll use Deputy Mayor's answer to it before yesterday or tomorrow. Just as soon as you possibly can. I have yours.
Date.
Yeah, I need a date. Okay.
Identify a date.
What's this, the 1st? Next Monday's the 7th. Let's do it someplace like today's Tuesday.
What about the
already.
14th? We split the difference between the meeting
Well, that's the
and
Friday,
today.
right? What's a Friday?
2 weeks.
The
So
2 weeks, yeah.
2 weeks
So
to
what's,
get
what's
it-
that Friday?
If you're worried about duplications, don't put them through the process of trying to figure out what's a duplicate. Just bring them all forward. We'll
take care of
them.
them. Just get them in
as
as
a
soon as
council,
possible.
strike them off. Say, yeah, that's a duplicate. We'll do it
Yeah, if you
real
can,
time.
if you can get them to me by,
Point of order. So I'm just trying to understand. Are we saying we're going to have a study session before the study session to cleanse this?
No, real time. During the study session, Romero, and we'll just send them.
we shouldn't even be talking
questions.
about this because the agenda item's over,
Yes,
right? So,
I would agree.
So with that being
Moving-
said, get me your questions, hopefully by the 7th, which is next Monday. If you have a couple of days after, I need your questions by next week. So staff can get this done and I can get to the YMCA. We can get a meeting set up by the end of October.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I have to ask council, it's 8:42. Do we need a break? I know our lobbyists have been waiting for us through this entire
Houston,
long
they're lobbyists.
break or go? Okay. I'm sorry, we have council members that are crying uncle up here. We're going to take a 5-minute break.
Good evening, Mayor, Deputy Mayor, Council, and Mr. City Manager. My name is Mike Sugg. I am your Senior Management Analyst, and I am joined tonight by Luke Esser and Nick Federici, who are two of our state lobbyists, who are our two state lobbyists. And we're here tonight to kick off the discussion on legislative priorities. So the plan was for Luke and Nick to start with an overview of the 2019 legislative session outcomes, and then we can move into the discussion on next year's 2020 priorities. So I just quickly want to say that we had some really great outcomes this year, not only on the city's list of priorities, but also working with our partners such as AWC and SCA to help influence a variety of legislation for the benefit of Sammamish residents. For example, the minimum density legislation that came to the council a couple times in a couple different versions. So with that said, I will let our lobbyists walk us through our outcomes, and they will be referencing Exhibit 3 in our packet tonight, which is also pulled up on the screen. So, gentlemen.
Well, thank you very much. Luke Esser, thank you again for the opportunity to be one of the state lobbyists for the city, and also thanks to Mike for being the one who put together the wonderful SAM legislative priorities one-pager for us, and it really did help to deliver a very crisp message to local legislators about the importance of these projects. We were pleased that with the support of local legislators, we were able to obtain a little over $1.5 million of funding for Salmon Passage Culvert Improvement projects, approximately $1.2 million for the George Davis Creek project, and a little over $350,000 for the Ebright Creek project. And I think legislators were impressed by the work that has already been done on other similar projects, and by the fact that the city has strong partnerships with other local governments and local tribes, and that definitely helped us to be successful on your behalf. We were not able to obtain any funding on transit or road projects at this time. I think we did help to raise the profile of some of those issues and get them higher on the radar screen of local legislators, but it is a challenge in the transportation world when there's not a new transportation budget, new transportation revenues to get those funded. But I think we're positioning ourselves well to make sure that those projects are remembered in future years. And finally, the bill that we call the Metro Monopoly Lifted Bill, we did have some modest success in the Senate version of that bill. We actually got it out of the Senate Transportation Committee, and that was a helpful sign. One challenge going forward is that our prime sponsor, Senator Guy Palumbo, retired from the legislature to take a job with Amazon, and so we need to figure out who the next champion would be, but that bill remains alive for the upcoming legislative session in 2020, and I'll let Nick address the additional priority items on the list.
Thank you, Luke. Nick Federici, your other, the left-hand punch of your righty-lefty combination in Olympia. Just to speak about the additional priorities, House Bill 2044 we worked on very hard. Representative Tana Sen from our local delegation took leadership role and sponsored this to create a pathway for de-annexation of a portion of the city from the Falls City metropolitan park district, since that wasn't actually delivering services, and folks were in the city were being sort of double taxed for park services, and that passed unanimously from the legislature, and was signed into law. It sets into place a process for you to undertake to complete that de-annexation, and I think it was an excellent success story of working with a lot of stakeholders and your local delegation. And then on condominium liability reform, there were a lot of negotiations during the interim leading up to the legislative session that resulted in agreements between various legal entities that were suing one another, as well as builders, realtors, et cetera, in the housing space, to come up with a consensus agreement there that nobody got all of everything that they wanted, but there were some major clarifications about when people could sue and some limitations of liability for HOA boards of directors, et cetera. And so everybody, I think, walked away from that feeling like they got enough to have condo construction move forward more robustly than it had been previously. Time will tell. But we had, I think, a great first year working with our team together with you, and really enjoyed that, and looking forward to the upcoming 2020 session, which is a short legislative session under the state's constitution, 60 days for that regular session, and it is an election year, so legislators like to get done on time and get home to start hitting the doors.
Great. So now we will shift our focus towards 2020, and included in your packet as Exhibit 1 is a list of potential priorities for you to consider. This is not completely exhaustive. This was just some brainstorming between the lobbyists and I, and the council members may have some additional priorities that come to mind. The list is basically organized into buckets that align with our focus areas for 2019. So we have roads, transit, stormwater, which were our main three, and then kind of a list of other uncategorized items. We did something that's not included on this list, but we received yesterday, was a proposal from the city of Renton to basically dealing with cybersecurity. So they're brainstorming ideas for how the state can support local jurisdictions that are affected by, cybersecurity attacks or viruses, things like that. Some of their initial ideas deal with a rapid response team to help jurisdictions that are hit by a virus, statewide training for local jurisdictions, space in the state data center for cities, and things of that nature. We can discuss that proposal more in depth if that's something that the council would be interested in. Again, it's just a first draft that the city of Renton is working on with one of their representatives. So I think the goal for tonight would be to land on a preliminary draft list of priorities the council would like to pursue. Luke, Nick, and I can then transfer that list into the SAM graphic and bring it back at a future council meeting for further refinement. So we're happy to help answer any questions or facilitate the discussion as needed. But with that said, I will turn it back over to the council for discussion.
Councilmember Ross. Oh, okay. Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This is a great list. As always, you do excellent work. One of the things that, do you want us to just kind of go down and add things to it and make comments? Is that the easiest way to go, or?
Yeah, this is basically just a list of all the, it's probably not what we would land on. It's not focused enough.
Sure.
But we could talk about any individual items that you may have questions on, or we could add to this list, whatever works best for you.
Yeah, I don't know, when in dealing with the 202, which I think is a great item, the study that we reviewed really talked about the intersection at 202 and East Lake Sammamish Parkway. So I really feel like that should be very specifically called out, because it at least my understanding.
It's number 2.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think that needs to be.
That was quick.
Yeah, sorry. I guess what I'm getting at, I'm not sure that the 450 to 600K, I mean, is that just a spitball in terms of amount of money, or?
That was right from WashDOT's 202 study. That was their
Okay.
estimate from the low to high range of construction.
Got it.
And then we threw the design estimate in there.
Okay, all right, because that seemed to be sort of the root of all evil, based according to that study. So I'll just run through one of the things that I'd like to see on 202, and I don't know if we want to call this out specifically, is prioritize or optimizing for transit. Right, so as we're asking for money, I feel like the infrastructure and transit asks should go hand in hand. That if we really want to encourage people to take transit, transit has to go faster than the cars. So that would be something I would like to see us throw in there. I don't know that we are far enough along with Sound Transit to look at potentially asking for money from the state on a transit center, right? So we're getting money from Sound Transit for a park and ride, but we'd like to maybe make that a little more robust. In dealing with the environment, one of the things I'd like to add to the list of organizations or groups that we tend to lobby in conjunction with, I'd like to add K4C to that list. So for those who don't know, it's the King County Cities Climate Change for Cities. I don't know, there are 4 Cs, that's why the 4 Cs. Basically, it's an effort with King County and a bunch of cities in King County who are working on climate change collaboration efforts. They have a number of efforts that they're working on currently, residential building codes, also looking at PSE rate case, the PSE Integrated Resource Plan, the Puget Sound Clean Air Agency Clean Fuel Standards, and the 2020 SCAP update, as well as Clean Energy Transformation Act rulemaking. So there are a number of efforts that the K4C is working on. All of these efforts are to reduce the climate impact from King County. They have specific targets and specific dates that we're looking to achieve that. So I would like to see us include their organization and figure out how we can coordinate our efforts with them. And then I would like to see us add some additional funding for schools in terms of capital projects, as well as additional funds for a lot of the other things that schools are now being asked to do, including mental health, counseling, addressing things like vaping. Those are all additional expenses that the schools are, being asked, additional tasks which carry expensive that the schools are being asked to do that I don't know that they have direct funding for, and I think we should try to address those as well. So,
Councilmember Hornish.
Yes, Mike, I appreciate it. I don't think it is focused, so I appreciate it's kind of a layout and talking points to consider. I like the cybersecurity idea. I'm wondering if we wouldn't want to add to the list to consider is now the Zachus Basin Plan project specifically, and try to get that in the works. I mean, it's nothing. I know we're going to try to talk about those in the mid-by amendment to the budget and try to budget that from our own, but maybe we can actually try to get some help on some of those projects too. I don't have anything in mind, but I would just ask you to maybe consider that. I am supportive of Councilmember Stewart's K4C. I'm questioning of how we get involved with trying to get funding for schools, though, so I scratched my head on that one.
Councilmember Ritchie.
I was just going to mention really quickly in response to Councilmember Hornish's comment was the Zachus Creek Basin Plan. I had talked to Danica, our stormwater manager, about that, and I don't think we're quite ready yet to make an ask. I'm not super familiar with the project, but my understanding is that we haven't quite gone through the prioritization effort for the implementation actions that came out of that plan. So that may be something that we look at next year, but my understanding is we're not quite ready for this year or for 2020.
Okay, as long as you considered it, thanks.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. I am supportive of roads, item 1 and 2. I think that the fact that we're dealing with 202, the fact that we can work with our friends in Redmond and our King County councilwoman and Sound Transit and all the building that's going on there, those areas at Sahalli at 202 and East Lake Sammamish Parkway at 202, I think that presents a really good opportunity for local electeds at the state level to have a golden shovel in their hand during an election year. So, speak to that. I'm definitely in favor of number 1 and 2 on roads. I guess we're just calling roads. I'm going to say that I support number 1 under stormwater. If we can, more to Councilmember Hornish's point, if we can get something organized, because we had such success last year with the salmon culverts. I'm not sure what the status is of that Supreme Court decision. Is there still a bucket of money out there that we can tap into? I'll just defer to you guys to tell us if there's still an opportunity there for us, because if there is, maybe we should move up planning of Zacus and plug in Zacus and Ebright together and let's get her done.
Councilmember, the result of the lawsuit you're referring to is that there is a large obligation of the state over the next decade to spend in the neighborhood of $2 to $3 billion on fish culverts around the state. So they will be coming up with a funding proposal if they're going to comply with that court order. I can tell you that a lot of cities and the Association of Washington Cities are delivering the message that there are a lot of other important culverts in local government jurisdictions, and that while the state is solving its problem, which it should also help local governments to solve the same types of problems with city culverts and county culverts. So that's an issue that is definitely going to be on the AWC agenda and a lot of local jurisdictions' agenda in the upcoming session.
So does it make sense to, just in terms of timing and where we, work with we direct our staff, does it make sense to, we have Ebright ready to go, reasonable amount of money to throw at this? How many bites of the apple do we get? You mentioned a decade. Does it make sense to try to get a couple of these done at once and prioritize that and ask our staff, direct our staff to bump Zacus up and get it ready for this session? We've got a couple months before the session starts. If it can be managed, is that something we should do, or should we just stick with Ebright and then look at another session into 2021?
I don't think it ever hurts to have a project or two in each category. Okay. And those ones where they're not quite ready, you've at least laid the groundwork for a future session. One challenge I will note for Ebright is that we did just get $352,000 of funding this year. So we may face some questions from the local legislators who helped us to get that money. Has the scope of the project changed? Has the price of the project gone up? Why are you coming and asking us for more money when we just gave you $352,000? And there may very well be good answers to all those questions, but we do need to be ready for, to remain grateful for what we already received, but also to let them know that an unmet need remains. And so that's the only point I would make about Ebright.
That's why you guys make the big bucks, answering those tough questions, right? I'll add one more, then I'll step back. Number 2 under other. I know since Bob Hasagawa, the Public Works Trust Fund is something that it answers a lot of questions for the kinds of projects that we have, and in an area that has underutilized or overutilized and underdeveloped roads, and underdeveloped and overutilized stormwater, and keep going. If we had access to that, if it was fully funded, if it was active, and if municipalities like Sammamish had access to the Public Works Trust Fund, we wouldn't be going hat in hand to the state every cycle, every session, right? That's, if it's at all possible to use us as a poster child of a newly incorporated city that had some legacy problems from our King County predecessors, then please put us up as, if this was there, this is what they could do, and we could have a really smooth running city and council. I think that is, to my mind, I know that's an AWC priority. I know that's just but I think that speaks to our issues in our city is, how do we get the resources to do what we know we need to do over the next few years, and not looking backwards, but looking forwards. How does that work? And if that's available to us, I think that is, to me, number one priority, other than the 202 and East Lake Sammamish Parkway and Sahalli Way and 202. Those three things to me stand out as head and shoulders above everything else. They're accomplishable. Can I have one more question? Do you think there's going to be a transportation package in this session because it's an election year and they're talking about it?
I will attempt to answer as many of your questions as I can, Councilman Ritchie. as Luke said earlier, I don't think it's ever bad to have a number of asks in place and sort of a variety of sizes. This is an off-budget year, right? Supplemental budget year. That means that to the extent that economic times continue to be good and are forecasted to be good, that there will be some spending there in supplemental capital, transportation, and operating budgets. The prioritization of that is still a little murky until we get to Olympia and have some more clarity about that. Public Works Trust Fund is, I think, the number 2 item on AWC's public policy agenda. It's something that has been Peter, that has been robbed to pay Paul many times. This last year, the legislature increased the Model Toxics Control Act tax on hazardous substances, particularly oil, and previously a large portion of that had gone into the Public Works Trust Fund. The allocation of that is still fluid, no pun intended, and so there could be some opportunities here. I think a lot more rubber will meet the road in both transportation and capital, including Public Works Trust Fund, in 2021 when they come back around. It's not clear that they're going to do a new big transportation funding package. If they do, it will probably be some way in concert with low carbon fuel standard and or some sort of climate effort, carbon tax, cap and trade type of thing that may fund transportation package. That's something that the Senate Transportation Chair, Senator Hobbs from Lake Stevens, has been very vociferous about, that's something he would like to tap into for transportation funding. It's possible that that's something that'll happen, that the stars will align properly in 2020 for that to happen, but it seems much more likely, both because of timing and just the need for everything to line up, that's more likely for 2021. So for the list of transportation projects that Mike has done a great job of sort of laying out here, I would just keep that in mind, that some of the bigger chunks are going to be much harder than they would have been, than they would otherwise be, because we're in a short off-year legislative session. But it's always good to have those things sort of in the pipeline so that we can, at a minimum, educate the local delegation and the decision makers about this in 2020, so that when they do have the funding and the will, if they don't in 2020, when they do in 2021, they go, oh yeah, I remember these from last year, sure, no problem, and which they always do, of course, so we have all that sort of constellation of stuff ready. That was a really long way of saying we're not sure, but there's lots of opportunities, and I think if we keep a flexible approach to this and have a number of different sort of scaled items, and are able to demonstrate that the city has already put skin in the game, if you will, around some of these things, transportation projects and others, that it increases our chances, whenever that becomes, the funds become available for that. So, but particularly around the Public Works Trust Fund, it's something that's going to continue to be a very strong drumbeat from the local government community, and something that I think there will be more progress on in the near future.
Thank you.
Councilmember Valderrama.
Yeah, so I'll thank you for your work. And as you talked about getting skin in the game on 202, I'd be remiss not to call out the earlier legislative committee that got some of that skin, thanks to the work of Mayor Jarrett and Keller, who had joined me on that legislative committee, thanks to Dino Rossi and Judy Clibborn, who got the first study done. And now to this, pulling this together to the 2019 Legislative Committee of Stewart, Richie and myself that were on and getting it together. One of the things that, as I look at this list and I step back, that made us successful in both those years was keeping it very succinct and short, the one-pager out there with stolen artwork that we could put onto the brochure that called out and jumped at people. And so I think that whatever we do, while we do have a couple of points, we should keep it very succinct. It is a short session, so they're looking at tying up loose ends primarily in this short session. Things can change, but if we can be hitting that, and I'm definitely supportive, obviously, of the circle and some of the points dealing with the road there. One thing that under the transit, when Dow Constantine came here for the Chamber of Commerce event, he committed that if the town center was built, that it would be a model transit-oriented development and that he would ensure that transit was coming. It would be worthwhile for us to go visit, since he said, hey, we have the #1 metro system in the country, and say, okay, what are you talking about? What do we have to do to get that transit that you were talking about? Sorry? Well, but he's committed, so I'm saying go talk to him and say, what is he committing? And then let's see that discussion. What were you raising out there? No, but I'm talking about just a couple of weeks ago, Dow Constantine had just said that here. So let them go talk to Dow and call him on what his statement was there. I think that would be worthy of it. I would go back to what was just mentioned below, that some of these things that are the AWC Public Trust Fund, we've been a beneficiary. It's very important to us. However, we already have the AWC carrying that water, so that could be an amendment page that we put in and let them focus on our specifics here. Likewise on the schools, I think the schools do a great program. We can put that as amendment, but let them look at that one page, what are our specific Sammamish oriented call out, and keep that down as we kept to 3 topics with subpoints onto it, would be my suggestion. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
I agree with the keeping it down to minimal. It's a short session, keeping it to just a few, and nothing new controversial. I like if you go up to roads 1 and 2. I agree with Councilmember Ritchie on those. 1 and 2 are my favorites up there. If you get down to transit, I did try to nail down Constantine down on money for this alleged transit stuff, but all I got back was we have no money from staff. But if you can nail them down on that, that'd be great. Good luck with that. So stormwater, I just talked to you guys about the fact that we've got a historical area that we've got some issues with. So I don't know if that could be our number 3, but kind of keep your ears open with that. The school district stuff, really, I think that needs to come from the school districts. So I would say the road stuff, and then when we get down to the stormwater for Ebright Creek and money that might be available for those would be my friends, and then the Public Works Trust Fund. So if we had to pick three favorites out of there, those would be my 3.
Councilmember Ross.
Okay, I like number 2. It's a good bang for your buck item that we should pursue. Perhaps another one would be 1 in addition to it if we need to figure out how to get to a few. I also look at number 1 favorably. On the transit number 1, employer shuttles, I'd like to see us keep the pressure on that, because it sounds like you're making progress, so don't take your foot off the pedal. And then finally, stormwater, see if we can get a piece of the culvert funding pie for that one. So those are the big 3.
Good. Real quick, under roads, I like 1, 2, and 3. I didn't hear anybody else say 3, but it's on our transportation improvement plan. We know we need to do something with it. It seems like an obvious thing we would want to ask for. Issaquah Falls City Road, quick question. Phase 2, we already have money. Not that we couldn't take more, but that may be a similar situation to Ebright, where we've already taken some grant funding for a project. Are we facing the same ask with that one? And I'm wondering if that one's worth throwing in there, especially since we haven't done any work relative to it. So Issaquah Falls City Road, we have a $5 million grant split between the 2 phases. So $3.5 million is on phase 1. The other part is on phase 2. So we do have some grant funding already, just as an FYI. Transit, as Councilmember Ross said, certainly very interested in pressing forward with that, breaking up of that metro monopoly so that we can provide transit service. And number 2 as well, the increased transit service. We need that. Stormwater. Those all look good. On the other, I think what we've done in the past is we've had like the 3 big buckets, at least the past couple years, and I still see a viability in SAM there. We may just have to shift the letters around a little bit. So the A in transit and the M in stormwater. But the other, So I was the one that brought up the improved mechanisms for transfer of the school district territory. We have had residents that have reached out to us repeatedly and have not had success. Although I did correspond with one of the residents and asked if they have attempted this first bullet, which is to get the signing, because I'm guessing if you go down to the legislature and say, have they tried everything? And we say, well, no, they didn't try the first one, that we're not getting very far. So I think we need to encourage the residents to exercise all possibilities before we go down to the legislature in all reality. The Public Works Trust Fund, I think that should be a back pager for us. I certainly support it, but knowing that a lot of times, well, AWC and I think SCA are all kind of, carrying that water too. I don't want it to be one of our highlights, even though it's something we really want. We just want to say, similarly to what we have, that we support AWC and SCA's legislative priorities as well. On the school funding, don't disagree with Councilmember Stewart. Don't think it belongs in ours. I think that is something that we can roll up to the Public Issues Committee and ask for them to champion as a potential legislative priority, possibly. Certainly something that the schools need as far as mental health and everything else that they're contending with. So I might suggest that we roll that up to the PIC meeting as well for consideration. I think we got through everybody. Do you guys have what you need from council?
Just really quickly to respond to the number one here under other, apologies for not following up with you on this, but I think either mechanism or either option to petition the school districts kind of results in the same outcome. So both result in the petition that goes to both school districts for consideration. Okay. And if neither wants to consider the petition, no matter which way it got to them, then the issue doesn't move forward.
So then I appreciate you bringing that up and highlighting that, because I think we're going to then it would be an exercise in futility for our residents to run around trying to collect signatures, all for the same result. And the reason that I wanted to bring this to the attention of the legislative committee, for it may be one of those back pagers that we do, is that we have students in Sammamish that are going to North Bend for school. When we talk about traffic and emissions and everything else that comes with jumping in your car, that's all bad. And then they really get divided from our community. Those students have to play on the baseball teams and stuff here, but then they're away, for school. And it's hard to build a community when you're dividing your community. So I think it's important that we ask and see if there is a mechanism to tweak it, because we're going to run into the same problem consistently. Snoqualmie Valley School District does not want to let go of homes that are over $1 million and are adding to their revenues. Understood. And I'm sure that the Lake Washington or Issaquah School District would welcome those. But it really is about the kids and our community, and the traffic is secondary, but certainly a very realistic component. And parents are trekking all the way out to North Bend, and they live. One of our school districts, Aldera is a neighborhood. The kids could walk to the elementary school, and yet they can't because they're in the wrong school district. Walk. Yeah. Deputy Mayor Moran.
Okay, so when we looked at houses, and we had kids long ago when they were small, one of the first things that we looked at was where those schools were. So when you buy a house, you're fully aware of the school district of which you buy in, and you're fully aware that across the road might be another school district, and you pay your price for your house accordingly. Some school districts are less and some school districts are more. If people bought their house here knowing it's an X district, it is not our job to be messing with the school district lines. I just think that is way out of our box. That is really something that needs to be with the school districts. It is something that was worked out long ago. I just feel that is way out of our line. I agree with you that it's sad that happens, but there's a lot of things that happen that way. I'm just stating my opinion. We should not be monkeying around with school district lines.
Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, Mayor, I actually really appreciate this issue, and I completely agree with you. I'm not sure, though, that it's a state lobbyist issue at this point. I feel like we maybe need to do a little bit more work on our end to figure out what exactly we'd be asking for. So I agree that it's something that would be nice to address somehow, but not sure that we're ready to put it here on the state lobbyist issue list. Because I'm not sure that we as a council have done our due diligence in working with the two school districts to really see if we can broker something before we take it to the state level to ask them to intervene, because I'm not really sure how the state would intervene there. So I would be happy to work with you on kind of brainstorming some ideas on what we could do to try to solve this for our residents, but I'm just not sure this is the right venue. Thanks.
So just as a little bit of history and context here is that for years, dating back, when's that letter that I sent you?
I believe there was a letter from 2010.
2010. So for 9 years, these residents have tried repeatedly, and there is a time constraint. So if once they go and lobby the school boards, they have to take, it's like, what is it, 4 years? They can't come back?
I couldn't find the exact date.
Yeah, so I'm just giving context that this is something that has been exercised, and the city has been involved to the degree that it can, which is basically supporting its residents, saying, we support whatever they're asking for. But the mechanics behind the scenes to enact change are not within. So I wanted to bring it to council's attention. We have residents that have asked for this, and they are stuck. And so I was trying to bring this to your attention to see if council was willing to do this as a legislative priority. Councilmember Valderrama.
Yes, for years we've asked to let our people go. But that said, I mean, it is what it is. It's a short session. I don't think that this is the time to be focusing on this. We maybe can revisit it on the longer session and have a more in-depth discussion. And frankly, it's as we found out, there's a lot of entrenched issues associated with those school districts. And so I would not put it on this agenda.
Okay. Got everything you need from us?
Yeah, I think there are some common themes among all the council members' answers. So we'll pull that together, get a draft graphic going, and then bring it back to the council for, I guess, further refinement and consideration.
Perfect. Thank you.
One final comment, if I may, Madam Mayor. I think my microphone is actually on now. There we go. In terms of transit, I would have the same comment as I would with roads. It's easier to procure funding for capital projects, one-time asks.
Yeah.
The legislature is leery about making long-term commitments for operating dollars. So I would bear that in mind as the document is refined. Is there a capital project, perhaps that park and ride lot or some other facility that I think we would have a better chance of success with? I just wanted to offer that comment.
Yep. Okay, very good. Thank you. Sorry you had to wait for a little while there before we got to you. Okay. Next we have a discussion on scheduling the mid-by budget workshop.
I'm back to talk about dates. So
You're married. I don't think that's appropriate.
not those kind of dates. I have a very lovely wife. So, okay. Scheduling the mid-by workshop. So we sent out an email, and basically we asked, let me get my calendar up here. We asked the council if they would be available, say 3 to 5 on October, 3 to 5 meaning 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. on October 29th or 30th to have our mid-by workshop. We got some feedback back that would not work. We also got some feedback that possibly, since we moved our meeting, our normal November 5th meeting to November 4th, there was an idea that came up, can't we just do it early on the 4th? Our normal council meeting is at 6:30. Do it early on the 4th, maybe have a little bit of food because it's going to be a long night, but maybe take care of it then, and then maybe have a little break and then start our council meeting and have our council meeting. So when talking with our finance department, the 29th and the 30th seemed to be the best days. The time was 3 to 5. I do have another meeting I'm going to try to schedule at the end of October, which has to do with another entity. So with that being said, I need some ideas from the council. What would you guys like to do, or some things we need to bring up in the mid-buy? But I'm not opposed to doing it on the 4th. If you want to meet early, just get it done instead of having an extra meeting, because we're going to have one extra meeting in October anyways, but we have it on the 4th.
We're talking about the 4th.
November 4th.
Yeah.
Yes, election eve on the 4th.
'Cause we moved the
We
meeting off
moved
the
it. We moved it so we wouldn't have a meeting on the election day, so that everybody can be free to, watch the elections and see how that works, and then whatever.
Those are work hours, and I'm on traveling those days.
Which days?
The 29th, so the 4th is the best for me.
Yeah.
Have it early, and we can do it. I mean, we allow 2 hours. We could do it an hour and a half if we just keep it moving along. I think we can get it done in an hour and a half. There are some things we need to bring up, as well, but I think we could. I think we could get it done, and we'd have to maybe start at 4:30 to 6, and then cut out for half an hour, and then start back at 6:30. So ideas, please.
I like the 4th.
On the 4th was brought up to do it early on the 4th to get it all taken care of.
Yeah.
How much time do we need in order to?
You just said an hour and a half.
We wanted 2 hours, but I think we work with finance department, and maybe we can chop down ours, because it's just about the mid-buy and the requests from staff, and also some of the things that we're talking about looking at for the new budget cycle, or do we want to implement in this year? Councilor?
What's the approach? I mean, what would be the agenda look? What would it look like?
I'm pretty sure that they're basically going to give an overview, kind of where we are, just like a regular budget overview, where we are expense-wise, what we've spent, and then kind of what myself and the finance department went through as far as requests from staff. So we knocked that down quite a bit, because we have some other things we need to talk about within that, and how we want to fund them. So I think it's going to be a brief kind of overview of where we are expenditure and revenue wise, kind of where we are within that process, and then probably go into requests and go into some other things, just to get the council's idea of what they think we should fund, and do they want to fund, and then just some stuff like that, I would imagine.
Okay, my main concern is process and how to make those decisions.
Sure.
And we got some very important mid-buy items, such as public safety.
Right.
That are highly supported by this council.
Yep, that'll be brought up.
And as I mentioned earlier, I want to make sure that we address the needs of public safety.
Yes.
But let's not automatically attach the tax to that item, but let's just figure out what is the bottom of our priority list, so we reassess this level of service and statement of work for the city to make sure that we're maximizing the taxpayers' money. And to the extent we can't fund everything, it's still a high priority. Maybe we'll maybe consider tax, but we'll attach it to a lower priority, so it's not emotional, something that is critical.
Yeah.
And so how you organize that, and I don't know, the rest of the council, if you need direction from the rest of the council, I'd like to ask that you take that approach with staff, that we help us understand what's falling to the bottom when we start doing the mid-buy priorities.
Okay.
So we can make some conscious decisions. We'd add a tax for this item, I don't know if I want that cricket on the treadmill, but, those types of things,
Okay.
So quick question relative to timing. We need an hour and a half?
Minimum, I think.
Minimum, okay.
Yeah, I mean, we'd like to have the full 2 hours, but I know people meeting at 4 o'clock might be a little difficult.
Yeah, 4:30 is even challenging.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could do it a different day. I mean, I have my calendar out. I mean, but Councilor Valderrama's not going to be here for that last week in October. Am I correct?
And I'm in meetings all day.
For that whole week, or just the 29th and 30th?
For that whole week. The first part I'll be out of the country. The second part I'm in the country, but I'm in meetings that full
Okay,
time.
so it might be kind of tough to do a couple of, or another meeting I have to get scheduled as well. So, okay.
Quick question, because we
yeah.
don't have, we have meetings the first 3 weeks. We are looking out because today is the 1st, so there's no meeting the week preceding the 30th either. Is that a possibility?
With the 21st, 22nd, or
Yes.
23rd? Yeah, I mean, it's really up to you all to see what you would like to do. We just wanted, I mean, we wanted to make sure that we at least get it done prior to November. So yeah, if we want to do it maybe sometime the 21st, 22nd, 23rd, I can look at those
I'm
dates.
just throwing it out as an alternate. I mean, if we land at 4:30, I'll see what I can do on the 4th, but it's going to be tough and close.
Okay, so I mean, we'll have October will be really busy for meetings, but I mean, I can ask Aaron tomorrow.
I would
Originally,
rather
we
do the
had
4th.
planned that the end of the month was for travel, and that's why.
This isn't the end of the month, though. This is the week prior to the end of the month is what I was
I
talking
know,
about.
but after the Tuesday, that's where we started to book our
I'm just
travel.
saying, but there's 2 weeks off. That's why I was suggesting that. If the 4th is the only day that works, it's the only day that works.
Yeah, if we don't get it done, we can come back. I mean, I don't think Aaron would be opposed to coming back to one of the other meetings and maybe having it early again. But you know, we would try to get it done within that hour and a half, so we could do 4:30 to 6, and then break for some food or something. But I mean, if we don't do food, we do snacks. We can go a little longer. We can go right up to 6:30. I mean, we can do the full until we do the meeting. So that's kind of why we wanted to talk to the council and see what you guys thought. And we save a meeting by doing it prior. It's gonna be a long meeting, but we've had long meetings before.
Well, we can eat and work. We've done that before too, so we
Right.
don't need the break.
Right.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Thank you. I noticed that there's a study session scheduled for November 12th. Is that too late? And if it's not too late, what is more pressing than the mid-buy review or discussion that we could place on that date?
The November 12th we were going to use that prior to that meeting, was going to be a legislative meet and greet that I guess we do every year. And so that was the date after the election that we were going to have possible legislators come early prior to the council meeting. That was the date selected to see if we can make that happen. I have not been to one of these before. Where's staff?
Once.
They ran.
Mary, we did that for, right?
Mary.
Okay. Oh, where's
You do still have one staff member here.
David? So last year we had this, right? Oh, Melanie, sorry. Jeez. Sorry, Melanie.
I don't know a thing about it. I'm sorry. Yes.
Can you help that?
We have done it.
Okay.
We've done it a couple different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a sit-down dinner.
Okay.
With all of the representatives.
Right.
And then
Okay.
I think the last year it was more like a, little meet and greet, yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think the 12th was slated for that. So that's what we were talking about, maybe doing the mid-buy either prior to that or on the 4th.
Okay, so I'm gonna, my ask is that given that we have difficult schedules, the mayor's spoken about her commitments, I have work and family commitments.
Okay.
Meetings before 6:30 are challenging across the board, period, full stop.
Okay.
Having said that, I think that it makes sense to do the mid-buy adjustment meeting as the study session topic on Tuesday, November 12th, and then to schedule the legislative meet and greet at any other evening that week, the previous week, the following, well, not the previous week, the following week, up until even into, I mean, I don't know, it starts getting a little odd, right? I mean, I'm thinking like, even if it was Thursday the 14th, if we had an hour's worth of, we're going to have 9 state legislators come in, that we would want them to be here, meet and greet, have the room set up. We have people here, we commit an hour or two, 6:30 to 8:30 on Thursday, the 14th, something like that. I think it's important that we do that. Getting the mid-buy done is critically important. Making sure that we have every council member here and committing that day and that study session to that topic, I think is more important than schmoozing state legislators. That's my opinion.
Okay.
Councilmember Stewart.
Can I ask a silly question? What is currently on the agenda? I'm looking at the long-term calendar and I don't see the 4th. What's currently on the agenda for the 4th? It just, right now, when I click on it, it's only showing me the 8th and the 15th.
Whatever's, no, what you need to do is go to, Melanie gave you guys a link.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay,
so
sorry,
I will go to
clicked on-
this link and I can pull it up right now. Under, where is it? Hold on, I will find that out for you right now.
Because I guess that would be the other obvious thing is to
Here we
just
go.
have it be whatever.
Okay, so what I have is November 4th, okay, is the public hearing and resolution. November 5th is open. We're not having
But
that.
the 4th,
Yeah.
it looks like the 4th, I mean,
On the 4th right now, we have a public hearing ordinance, the comp plan amendments, land use map, public hearing ordinance to adopt school capital facilities plans, and resolution, the urban forest management plan, and then we're moving the TMP status update out. So those 3 items are going to be on for the 4th. Our 5th meeting, we don't have one.
I'm sorry, just staying on the 4th, is the content in that meeting, I mean, that doesn't sound so bad to me that we couldn't add the mid-buy discussion on just the agenda for the regular meeting on the 4th.
Well, we got 2.5 hours slated for that.
Is it really, though?
Yeah, it's 60 minutes, 60 minutes, and 30
But
minutes.
like the comp plan amendments aren't
Hey,
those
David,
the
are you going
ones
to
that we
need
just?
the full 60, 60, 30 for those 3 items?
I mean, I don't want to cut anybody short, but aren't those the comp plan amendments that we just, oh, they're different comp plan amendments? Okay,
Yeah,
Sorry.
David can tell you right now.
that would be helpful. to
Thanks, David.
understand.
Make sure it's live. David Powell, Community Development. Good evening. The items that are slated for your review for November 4th include a land use map change, which is known as the Santoni rezone.
Yeah.
That has garnished quite a bit of attention at the level of the Planning Commission. Approximately an hour of public testimony was received related to that. Then we also have the Urban Forest Management Plan, which is a resolution adopting the Urban Forest Management Plan. That's been quite a bit of work put into that. If you recall, sort of the genesis of that is that there were many items added to that over time, and that's something that ties together multiple levels of policy efforts here at the city. So that's something the council might have a lot of interest, as well as the community may have a lot of interest in as well.
Okay. For the comp plan amendment, is there a deadline that needs to be on the 4th?
There is not, although there are public noticing requirements to go along with that. So every time we move something on this calendar, it does cause ripple effects up and down the calendar because of the public noticing requirements, and that then requires other items be moved as well. So when we look at moving one thing, they are attached by strings to other things, so those other items are then moved.
Hey, David, on the 12th, you have the discussion Shoreline Master Plan Program Review. That is our study session for an hour on the 12th. Can we bump that? If not, is it a full 60 minutes?
We are under state law required to complete that update. The state is tracking our review of that. That is a fairly simple topic from my perspective. And the Planning Commission has done quite a bit of work on that and narrowed it down for you. We have also sent off our draft to the State Department of Ecology, and they have given us a preliminary finding of, I'm trying to remember the right term they use for that. It's a special term, so it's an ecology term. It's generally, it's fine.
Okay. So we can actually, Counselor, we can actually do it on the 12th. It's 3 hours, it's our normal meeting, 2 hours for that, 1 hour for that, and we're good.
I'm in. You guys good?
On the 12th.
On the regular
As
time?
long as it doesn't interfere with getting the mid-buy done. I mean, I just want to make sure.
I will verify that tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay.
But we'll go with it, and if it doesn't happen, I can send an email and we can do something else. But, I mean, Aaron's not here, but there was a deadline he had to meet for something for that, so, but, yeah, I mean, we can do it on the 12th, because he was, let me see, hold on a second. Public hearing ordinance, so the mid-biennial budget is going to be on Tuesday, the 19th, for public hearing to approve it or adopt it. It's an ordinance for the mid-buy budget, so we get it done the 12th. The next week, we're going to be bringing it to the board for approval. We're good to go.
Is that too tight? Does that work, or is that pretty tight?
We just make it work.
Okay.
If that's what the council wants to do, we'll make it work.
Good.
Are we good on the 12th? Everybody good?
Yep.
Yeah? Consensus? We're good? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, David. Thanks, Melanie.
Okay, so next we have council reports.
I'd actually, I have one more item for new business. I'd like to make a motion that we allocate funding for and direct the city manager to conduct a public service announcement program to get information out to our residents, targeting our youth on what resources are available when they are, in fact, in need of help or their friends are in need of help. We had the Sammamish Action Forum for Youth last week, and the panelists, the 4 panelists that were there, indicated that they were not aware of, they knew that there were resources available, but they were not aware of what those were and how to get to those if they or their friends were in need of help. And so I would like to get support from the council to do that, as well as to allocate funds at the discretion of the city manager to provide to community organizations, including but not limited to the schools, counseling organizations, our Healthy Community Coalition, and even potentially our police chief, given the recent events, if there are any immediate needs for crisis counseling and other needs. So I would like to make that motion.
I'm not going to remember any of that. So
Yes, I can.
Can you send me
I
something?
can send that.
Can we just?
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot. That's
Second.
Yeah. Sorry, thank you.
But I have,
Yes.
No, we can have discussion.
Would you like me to clarify?
Written down.
Okay.
Hold on. Jason.
Councilmember Ritchie.
So yeah, just in terms of how we do motions, I mean, all due respect, we need to have a clear motion with clear language. It's seconded, and then it goes to the motion maker, and then they discuss why they want to do the motion. So I would like, with all due respect, I would like the motion restated as clearly as possible by the motion maker, and then I will second it again, and then I would like to leave my light on so I can have discussion after the motion maker is afforded the opportunity to speak to their motion.
Very well. So I move that we, as council, allocate, at this point, we can just put a stake in the ground, allocate $50,000 in funds to be distributed by the city manager to all community organizations supporting our youth in substance abuse, counseling, and crisis management, including a public service announcement program to ensure that our residents targeting our youth are aware of what resources are available to help them should they or their friends be in need of help.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Again, Councilmember Stewart.
Yeah, so again, just to reiterate that last week at the Sammamish Action Forum for Youth, we had a student panel there for high school students from Sammamish, and they stated that they were aware that resources existed, but they did not know what those were or how to access them if they or their friends were in need of help. So that's why I think that the public service announcement program would be helpful to ensure that we, get some sort of a flyer or a pamphlet on the, breakfast counter in every home, get things up in all of our local businesses and the libraries, whatever, the city manager and staff in working with our local organizations think would be appropriate to make sure that we get that help out there. And then also in light of the recent events, I think that it's important that we ensure that the organizations supporting our youth have what they need. So it's certainly not money that we have to spend, but to make sure that if the school districts or the counseling organizations that support the youth in Sammamish or any of the other organizations are in need of anything in the short term to handle the recent events and any other crises that they think need addressing or prevention, then I think that it's important that we make sure that our staff, particularly our city manager, have the resources they need to allocate to such causes. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Moran.
One, I think it's not that I don't think this is a wonderful idea, but I do know from working in the schools that there are organizations, and I know this from the Lake Washington side, and I know this from the luncheon from Lake Washington last year. We already have organizations that do this. So what we need to do is figure out where the hole is that exists on how to get that information that exists to each child.
Right.
So what we need to do is, rather than duplicate, rather than throw money at something, is to first try to organize. I think it's something that should go on the agenda for discussions when meeting with Lake Washington this week. And I think that's the starting point. I don't think just allocating money right now is a good idea. Maybe in another week when we can bring it up, that might be a better time. But for right now, the starting point is working with the school districts, talking to them and saying, you know, what can we do to make sure that we have the kids have access to all this information? Because I know it's there. I've seen some pamphlets that so we've just got to make sure that we make sure it's where it's supposed to be. And so I just want to, but us stepping in as the city, the kids are going to have better access of it through the school district. So I want to make sure that who we're partnering with is the school district, because that is where they are most likely to get that information from. Anyway, so I'm going to vote against it this week, only because I think the conversations have to happen before we allocate money, because we don't know what that's going to be yet.
Councilmember Ritchie.
Okay, so thank you. Councilmember Moran, I agree with you. What I understand this motion to be, and I'll ask Councilmember Stewart for clarification, and I'll ask the city manager if you understand this to be what I think it is, which is to actually direct you to serve as a conduit, organizer, aggregator of these different resources, that to Councilmember Stewart's experience with these 4 students at this event that they were not aware of, or that they did not know how to get to work with. It's not just here's 50 grand, go blow it and have a PR campaign. It is, where are their problems, where are their issues, serve as that community municipal governance aggregator of these different resources. We're not providing the resources ourselves as a city. We are the service connector. That's what I understand this to be. And if you do need resources to tie these people together, if there is a mailing that's appropriate, if there is something that needs to be done that costs less than $50,000, I believe this motion gives you that power to do it. We are in an emergent situation right now, given the tragic events at Skyline this week. And I think that it is critical that we act with all due haste to empower the city manager to go out into the community, serving with our community, our communications director, to work with the local school districts to connect the resources that already exist where there are breakdowns. And frankly, until Councilmember Stewart said that, it didn't seem to me that there would be. There apparently are services out there, but there are communication breakdowns. So I support the motion if it is to empower the city manager with some resources that he already has available to him, to create these connections, to not reinvent services, nothing like that, but to find out where there are loopholes, where services are not connecting to those that need them, and to actually get out in there in the community, given the emergent situation that we're in right now. I support the motion if that's what it is. May I have clarity if that's accurate, Councilmember Stewart?
May I respond?
Yes.
So yes, for me it's actually 2 parts. One is to conduct the public service announcement. It is not to duplicate any services or recreate anything. It is to take the services, for example, Deputy Mayor, the information that the Lake Washington School District Foundation has put together. They have an amazing flyer that has a lot of information on it, and I believe that the Issaquah Schools Foundation has similar information. What I'm hearing, not only from those students, but from parents that contacted me today, is that that information, while we know about it, is not as readily available to the students, and that they're not always asking for help at school. So while the schools are a great place for them to get help, they're not always asking for help there. So I think that there is a gap in that communication. So part of it is that public service announcement piece, right? Which is, again, we're not going to create services. We're just going to work with the school districts, the foundations, to understand how can we do a better job of getting that information out there.
Can I ask one quick question? Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to clarify because it just came up. Is the city manager going to be at the meeting that we're going to attend, that the three of us are going to attend on Wednesday or Thursday?
Let's talk about it there.
I mean, I think that's a great starting point. What can this, if this passes, if you're there as a city manager, can you speak to this at that meeting? That would be my ask. That would
Yeah, but I won't attend that meeting this time. I'll be there for the next round. But one of you counselors could bring that up, and I'm hoping to have Angie go to that like she did the last meeting. But actually, Melanie came up with an idea. Could we refer this to the Human Resources Commission? Human Services? Human Services Commission, and we can do something like that, but still work with myself and Sharon. I mean, we had talked about this already, doing stuff like this and partnering with the school districts. And I think the big thing is partnering with the school district to see where that disconnect or where that loophole is. But we could do that, and one of you counselors can bring that up with the Lake Washington School District when you do that on Thursday, and start that process depending on what the outcome of this motion is. But yeah, we're all in on this, whatever needs to happen.
I don't disagree. I just want to make sure that I think that should be also included. The Human Services group should be included, but not limited to.
Okay.
Clarify, so I was asked to clarify the motion. So part of it is on the communication piece, but the other part is to have funding available so that should the school district or the organizations that need to provide counseling and crisis management to the students, should they be in need of resources to provide that counseling right now in an emergency situation, that we make sure we have funding available to them. We're not going to go out and provide anything. We're going to be here in that supporting role. So if the Issaquah School District or Skyline High School or Youth Eastside Services or whoever it might be that needs to provide the counseling and crisis management or anything else that they feel that they need, if they need that and they have an issue with resources, that they be allowed to come to our city manager and he be empowered to provide that to him in this emergency situation. That's what my motion is. Thank you.
I'd like to offer an amendment because what I heard today directly from the school districts is they want to lead. We made some hiccups today.
I'm sorry, I just said that it was not for us to lead, but to have resources available should they come and ask.
You just interrupted me. Can I just have the floor for just a second? My amendment is to engage the school districts first. Our city manager has a $50,000 signing authority anyway. So if he engages the school districts directly with Jane Stavum from the Lake Washington School District, Ron Thiele from the Issaquah School District, and asks, what do you need from us? I think I would prefer, based on conversations I had today, we stepped on some toes over here, and we need to give them the ability to engage with us directly. I appreciate the sentiment behind the motion. I'm totally with you that we need to do everything we can. My simple ask is that we give direction to our city manager to engage directly with the superintendents first and come back to us, and he's got $50,000 signing authority. So if he finds a gap where that public service announcement or whatever it is that we need to do, I just want to be able to, I want to be sure that we are asking the school districts first before we go and do something. So that is my amendment.
Second.
Okay, it's been seconded. So we are now discussing the amendment. Councilmember Ross.
I support the amendment, and I do think it ultimately, these types of things should go to the Human Services Committee or Commission. And so, yes, I support it. The amendment.
Councilmember Valderrama.
I also support the amendment, and that this should also go to the Human Services Commission. And it is under his signing authority already that he's go, so I don't know if we have to give him money because it's under his signing. We can direct them, so that part isn't necessary. It also changes the perception. We're not running in with a bag of money into it. Let's coordinate the strategy. He's been directed to be able to assist, and then we can be a bit more effective in our communication strategy that we're going to be laying out.
Mr. City Manager?
Oh, it's still on.
Okay. Councilmember Ritchie.
Okay, so I support the amendment. I support the motion. I think that this is, I think that they're, God forbid, complementary to each other. I mean, I think that that's, I think that we're asking the city manager to talk to the school districts because of the fact that we're going after youth and we want to make sure we're connecting with youth and we want to catch them where they are. So we're going to talk to the school districts first. So I support the amendment to the motion. I also support the body, the rest of the motion, which is that we are going to, again, all those other things included, including the Human Services Commission, including the local agencies that we have available to us. The purpose of the motion is to ask the city manager to act as a conduit aggregator for those things. And I believe, not speaking for the mayor, but please correct me if I'm wrong, the purpose of the amendment is to make sure that we are working in tandem, in partnership with the school districts. I support the amendment. I guess I didn't see that the amendment was necessary, but let's be very clear about what we're saying here. Let's work as a partnership. Let's be clear. We have a motion and amendment. I support both of them, and I call the question, please.
I'll second that. The question's been called.
Somebody
Deputy
second
Mayor,
it.
your light's still on. Do you want to speak? Otherwise, we're going to vote to call the question. Do you want to take your light off, or are we voting on whether the question's being called? We got the question.
Withdraw.
The question has.
Withdraw.
Okay,
Withdraw.
go ahead.
Christy, I've got some comments too that I've been trying to get your, you're probably not looking at your phone.
Okay, you know, for somebody who works in the school district, and as I'm going to tell you, we've got to let the school districts take the lead on this. Our job as the city council is to go to them. Rick, you need to go to them and just say, we're here to support you. What can we do? That's our job.
With a phone call.
It.
Okay,
is that
Councilmember
clear?
Hornish.
I am for the amendment. I'm against the primary because I think it's premature. I don't think we know, and I appreciate, I think it's the Human Services. Remember, we just increased, we as a council, increased funding for much of our youth mental health issues, for lack of better words. So I think we need to be refreshed as to what money we already have committed as a city and what communications we are doing. Part of the issues we had, and I think it's certainly why Melanie brought this up as to Human Services, when we put the commission together, before we had a commission 3 years ago, we were very frustrated that people don't know what services are out there, and it's difficult to communicate that to people. We need to better ascertain what we're doing already before we start doing everything, but I'm fully supportive of telling the schools that we're here to support.
Councilmember Stewart.
I just would like to clarify that the goal of the motion was to make sure that we were here as supporting. I didn't mean go rush out and throw $50,000 at anybody. It was more to make sure that the organizations that are out there, the school districts and the counseling organizations that are out there, are aware that we are here for their support, and that if they need something in this crisis moment, because they may be short of resources, that we direct our city manager to be available, to make himself available to them, so that when they need that support, they know that it's here and that our council is supporting them. So this was never intended to be go out and step on anyone's toes. This was to be make sure that we are here to support people, because sometimes they do need resources and we need to make sure that they are available.
Move to
Okay.
vote.
Yes. Okay, all those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
By a vote of 7-0, the amendment passes. So now on the main motion as amended, and I'll
Does the main motion get overtaken by the
pretty much.
amendment? So
It does. The amendment it overtakes, because you had said $50,000 allocate funds to community organizations.
Make it available should they need
Okay.
it, is what I said.
The amendment basically is saying we're going to engage the school districts first. That one's passed. So now we are voting on the main motion as amended. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Nay.
Okay, by a vote of 6-1, the motion as amended passes. Okay, we still have council reports. I need a motion to extend.
So moved.
To when?
10:10.
Okay.
10 minutes.
Okay, there's been, second. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay, I need hands on the ayes. Hands. And the nays?
I was an aye.
Sorry, Tom.
Tom's an aye.
Okay. we're going to 1010. So,
I think
He
he said
was.
he was an aye.
Okay.
so
Yes, yes.
Okay.
we're extending till 1010. I'm going to gloss over my council report real quick and defer everything to next week. Although I want to highlight the fact that we have got to schedule our city manager's 6-month review. That needs to be done this month. So council needs to coordinate that. Kim, I assume that means we need an executive session at some point?
Yes.
Yes, but my reading of the contract is it doesn't actually have to be completed until
Okay.
the end of the year.
Okay, but I think we need to start now, knowing what that process looks like. If we don't start it, it won't get done this year.
Okay.
So if we can just maybe add that on as an executive session. Okay.
Yeah.
Anybody else with a council report that can't, like, Councilmember Stewart, you've provided yours in writing. We don't need to go over it. Anyone else with anything? Mr. City Manager, you have a council report? Very quickly.
Yeah, I
some
mean, it's
bulleted
pretty
items.
basic,
Okay.
right? You guys can kind of see that yourself. I don't really have to add anything to it at this point, unless you have a specific question.
I see none. Okay. Need a motion to adjourn?
To adjourn.
Second. Okay, all those in favor? Say
Aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. By a vote of 6-1, we're adjourned.
You have to say that, huh?